Welcome to SoundMindBeats podcast. We go live Tuesday, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, USA, every week. Please come and join us on TikTok. And in case you missed it, we're going to be uploading the full versions here on YouTube. Thank you for listening. What's up, everyone? We're just getting prepared for the podcast today. So I'm going to have some of my audio friends come on. So if you're an engineer out there, you will probably benefit a lot from this live today. Why isn't my internet working? That's weird. There we go. Okay. Thank you for the likes. Appreciate you. What's everyone up to today? We're just going to be waiting for a little bit. Just making sure. There goes Brian. Brian's already here. Brian's always 40, what's up, what's up? Thank you, I appreciate you.
Oh, yeah, I got fat face when it started. It was like, what's happening?
Well,
I know I need to, chop a couple LBS off, but
How you been, man? I know it's been a minute.
That it has, man. I've been busy, probably more busy than I should, actually, but too busy is probably better of an option in a binary choice to being not busy enough,
Absolutely. I mean, I like, at least for me, every day I'm searching for things to fill up my time, if I don't have anything to do. So
I'm pretty sure your time is going to be very full shortly.
Yeah, it's already kind of there,
Right.
just running around doing all this stuff for sure. Good morning, Omar. How are you, man? Welcome in. We should get I know Piazza's gonna show up. Isaac should be here. I couldn't get a hold of Christian. So we'll see who else shows up. I know we're gonna probably talk a little bit about this AI stuff.
Most definitely. Yeah, I was actually just texting with Will a little earlier today. I don't know if he's around or not.
Oh, dude, I totally forgot to text him.
I won't tell.
You know what?
Just edit this part out,
Well, I could I could text him right here. Here we go. I got him.
Gotta have that the studio burner phone, right?
Yeah, I have my laptop up, which is weird. It's not letting me get into my backup account. TikTok.
What's up, Fat Sounds? Good morning, buddy.
So anything like new and exciting? What's up, Dwizer?
Man, new? No, but just a lot of the same. So just got back from a week in San Diego doing some live stuff. I was doing some mastering at night in the hotel room, when I was there, and came back and doing some live shows, playing drums, and then spent the past couple of days tracking some stuff for this sort of, it's not, I guess it's a throwback. It's like a 90s country kind of thing, stuff with that sort of vibe. Okay. Less bro country than we have today, where it's like take a Jack Antonoff bed, throw a banjo on it, and now it's like 2020s country. So it's a little bit more traditional stuff. But yeah, so I was cutting a whole bunch of drums, and then yesterday, bass player came by. He's killer guy, John Mitchell. He's an older than me, but used to play with this band called Asleep at the Wheel, which has been like a classic country sort of Texas swing band. They've been out since the 70s. They're in, it's one of these sort of legacy acts. They've been around for a long time, and some of the the original members are there, and sort of the lineup changes. But came in and crushed 10 songs in 3 hours.
Wow.
So yeah, just great. It's one of those guys that you plug in. I had 2 channels, but ended up just using one. Just sat in the control room, played down a tune, and most of them are first takes. There's a couple where it's oh yeah, that's where the chords. Let me just do a quick punch, nudge one note over, and I'm like, great, save, next.
Nice.
When you get to work with people like that are just consummate professionals, pro, and maybe we'll use this as a springboard for later. they are very good at the basics of what they do. You know, as a bass player, like his time is rock solid. The feel is rock solid. Like choosing when to play and more importantly, like when not to play. Like you can't get 5 easy steps on YouTube to learn that kind of taste and sensibility. That takes time. Yeah. So that did a mastering for another one of the Porter's Gate, which is a kind of a Christian indie act that's out there. You can check them out on Spotify. So I think that song's coming out. I want to say August sometime. I think that's the release. So yeah, man, busy for sure. And then kids and kids summer activities and dad, I need a ride. And hey, can I have some money? You know?
Yeah, it doesn't stop.
No,
you
not
know,
at all.
It's so important, dude. Like I've had this perspective, being around really good session players and then some that aren't so tight.
Yeah.
Oh, when you get around those people, it's magical. Like you said, you cut 10 records in 3 hours. That's you're cooking. Like that's fast.
For sure. And again, he already had the charts. So I mean, he was prepared. I'm sure if he was just reading stuff down, you know, it might take a little bit for where we sort of decide where the feel landed on some things. But yeah, he had the demos and he came in and I listened to him on the way over. I've done plenty of sessions that are like that where you get a demo and, you know, yeah, absolutely, I'll be there next Saturday. And then it's like Friday night and you're like, oh yeah, I should probably check out those songs. Someone's paying me money to play tomorrow, you know? But it's funny. Yeah. You said something like some session guys that weren't good. And I think that there's a big distinction between there's a session player and then a player you hired to come to a session. And it's two different mindsets, you know,
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. They just kind of know their parts, you know, and they're really good at it. And like, in fact, I had a guitarist come here last week and just way all over the place. Dude, do you even practice? You know, 50 takes to get this one little solo down, and you know, it's just like it's frustrating. Like that like kills the vibe. It kills the
for sure.
Flow, like there's something about that, you know, and don't get me wrong, it's an incredible guitarist. Like love the guy. Like he's great. He's like super good. But in studio, it's just different. It's a different vibe. It's totally different. And to stay tight on timing is like,
oh man, it is again, these are things that I think some people are born naturally with a good sense of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even with those sort of natural gifts that, you know, I think that I was born with an average sense of time and really had to work on it. And I still work on it today. But wherever you landed, you know, backside, middle, a little ahead of the curve, like you have to work on that. And then it's all the things of, great, now here's the click. Do you want me on it? Do you want me on the back of it? Do you want me on the front? And maybe those type of things like, yeah, for the verses, it needs to land square in the middle. And we want to create a little energy on the choruses. I don't want to rush, but you want to push it a little on the front. Then there's a halftime bridge and you really want to lay it back, but it's all still the same tempo. I mean, you just have to like practice that thing. And you talked about like doing some breathing exercises and stuff like that before. And I mean, I think about, you know, session drumming a lot, almost like a singer where I need to take a breath in between things and make sure that like there's space for all the notes to come out. And oftentimes you have way more time to play than you think you do. So you can relax on things and just sort of let it naturally come out, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, I actually struggle with timing. Like I've never been like, I can't go live and play. It just, I literally fall off. Like by the end of the song, like something happens to me. I don't know what it is. And I've always had this issue. And, you know, rapping and doing those type of things, I didn't playing. I don't know what it is. Brain and fingers. And once the times, it's just something happens.
Sure.
Fall off. Yeah. I'm one of them.
Yeah. So, getting straight to a comment, 4856, dude, if you're playing and the engineer doesn't have to line up parts, what's up, Michael?
Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, if you're playing it and you don't have to line up parts, I think that's great. And oftentimes, like, you know, the types of projects that I'm working on these days, um, I'm very happy with never having to line stuff up. And you can look at a grid, and sometimes you'll see like maybe a kick's a little in the front or something's a little on the back. But if it works right for the track, then sometimes like lining it up can be a feel killer. You know,
right?
You know, it's like that sort of like 2000s, 2010s, everything is super gridded. You know, like that. Sometimes that's the perfect feel for a song, and other times it's just not.
Totally.
You know, and so I was cutting the drums with the demo track, and it was something that was very similar to Fast as You from Dwight Yoakam. And it's, and like I'm sitting there first I'm like trying to go with the like exactly with the click, but like the hi-hat parts have that little tiny bit of like Ringo Starr swing to it.
Sure.
And I was just like, I started to like, you know, overthink it when I'm playing. I'm like, oh, I could feel that was a little this, and then it was a little that, and I was like, I turned the click down and just played along with the track, and it ended up like sounding so much better, and the feel is like, I'm not doing one of these, but like that was me trying to self-produce. It's like, look, dude, don't worry so much about being on the grid, be in tempo, but it's more important to be with the right feel.
Absolutely.
Than anything else, you know.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of the boom bap stuff, and you know, boom bap to me is it's a more of a live feel for like hip hop. You know, it's not like the trap hi hats.
Right.
Like, no human could play it, right? But like, I find it often in boom bap that like I'll put it on like, you know, the 1 and 4 count will be pretty much exactly on grid. And then I'll mess around with the other two, and I'll even change like the 4-minute touch, because like not all drummers hit the hi-hats at the same spot, you know, and each spot has a different little tone to it. And so it gives this natural feel. Right. It's super important to do this stuff, you know?
Oh, 100%. And just for those aspiring engineers and producers working with drummers, like just playing the hi-hat with a stick, like there's so many different spots of the hi-hat to hit, and there's so many different parts of the stick that all create ever so slight velocity and slightly different differences like in the attack. You can go back and listen to these old Jeff Porcaro, you know, Toto drummer, famous session drummer, and he would talk about like trying to make these hi-hat parts kind of have little bits of a lilt, not so much where it's like tick, 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 you know, but just kind of like a wave, and it's creating its own natural propulsion. You know, that Michael McDonald, I keep forget we're not in love anymore. That song, you know, and he's playing like one-handed, but you hear it's not, you know, it just has this beautiful pulse going across it. But Michael, you get any sleep?
No, about 3 hours, 4 hours a night.
Oh, you have your baby with you, bro. No.
Oh, man. Congratulations, dude.
Thanks, man.
Look how little he is.
She's a little.
Don't worry, they get big fast.
My apologies.
No, you're good. You're good. Well, she got no hair, so it's hard to tell. Yeah, we're about 4.5 weeks in right now.
Wow, man.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's so cool, bro.
So my life now is like, I started working. I took like about 3 weeks off. And it's funny, I was like, it's crazy how it worked out. I was in the middle of a project that just came out. The full project came out last week. It's with an artist named Yitai. He's a Chinese artist and a big rapper over in China. We're in the middle of his project, and it was like, you know, we had like 3 weeks to mix it. And it was like it's like 14 songs I had to mix, whatever it was. It's a lot of work. And literally, I was like, my last day working is a Wednesday. It was a Wednesday. And I told everybody, I'm done on this day. I'm done on Wednesday, whatever. Right. And my wife had a C-section scheduled for a couple of days later, so I needed a couple of days to get going. We finished it on Wednesday, just about. We had to finish it Thursday morning. Her water broke Thursday at like midnight. So like we didn't finish.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God. And it was just crazy. But it's amazing how in those moments, like, we stress over work and we stress over all this stuff. And this is a pretty big artist over in China, like sign the whole deal. It's, if it was an artist in America, we'd be like, oh my God, I can't not finish this. But in that moment, everybody was like, it's all good. Like the world, everything stops. You know what I mean? And kind of got back in the swing of things about 2.5 weeks into it. I kind of started working again. Obviously, my mix room's at home. My wife's off for about 4 months. So, I kind of got back into the swing of things. I'm trying to like not sleeping. I'm doing sleeping 3-4 hours a night. I'm just whatever. But like, it's like trying to navigate now. I'm like mixing 2 albums. I got a couple singles and I'm taking care of the baby. And it's like so my whole life has changed now. So I'm doing like 9 to 6 really in my hours. And I'm stopping at 6. I'm taking Sundays off. Like, I don't care. There's no exception. I'm doing half days on Saturdays. Trying to take all day Saturday off, but like trying to rethink how I'm doing things. Thanks, Eugene. I appreciate it. Thanks for the congrats. Yeah, life's been great. Life's been exhausting. But now I have a whole new reason to make money. I'm like, I got to make all this money now because daycare starts and daycare is crazy. So
gotta get that 529 started, man.
I gotta get that. Yeah, trust me, I know. We've already thought about that. It's like college is expensive, but it's very so. But everything's good, man. It's just it's figuring it out. Not sleeping, but got a whole new reason to get mixes done now. So it's cool.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking this. I was waiting for you to say something like, "Her water broke," and then you get some text. It's like, "Hey, could you send us one more version with the vocal up 0.3 dB?"
Well, that really like I kind of said what happened, but like I was finished. She was born on June 6th, so June 5th was my last day. That was a Wednesday.
Right.
Born on Thursday, so I told everybody like there, obviously like a label thing overseas, so there's a lot of people involved, and the producers here in LA, and it was a difficult project already because I'm in Central Time. The producer Miles William, who I've worked with for 13 years now, he's in LA, but then the artist and all the feature artists are in China. So like, 13 hours ahead of me. Miles is 2 hours before me. So like different days. So like it was a lot of back and forth. And then that Wednesday, I got on a call with Yitai in China at 7 a.m. my time, and I worked from 7 a.m. to about 8 p.m. on Wednesday, right? So I worked about 13 hours, and then Miles, we were gonna get on at midnight that night. Like it was like the craziest, longest day. I'd already not been sleeping, and I was like, at least I'm done today. I'll have a couple days to recover. We'll finish up the final tweaks Thursday morning. Whatever we had a sonogram that day, whatever. And then her water broke. So I was on no sleep pretty much. I slept about 45 minutes and her water broke. We went to the hospital. I was up all night.
Right.
After working 13, 14 hours, like, after doing that for 13 days, 2 weeks before, whatever. So like I was exhausted going into this, going into her being born. And as I found out, there is nothing more exhausting than a newborn. So like, I thought I was fine. I'm like, I'm prepared. I'm prepared for this. Yeah, right. Not even close. So I was exhausted going into it. And to your point, like they were like, yeah, can we just get a couple of tweaks here and there? Like when I was in the hospital, I was like, no, like it's just is what it is, But we managed to make it work. Small tweaks here and there. We got it over to Dale Becker mastered the project. He's a mastering guy over in LA. He just did like the Billie Eilish and big records. And I've been working for a while. So he was able to kind of like finish everything off and, make it sound great. And it was already pretty much done, but it was stressful, man. It's a whole other level of stress involved. Getting projects done on a deadline is tough. Getting projects done on a baby deadline is like,
yeah.
It was crazy, but you make it work. You figure it out, and now I'm trying to figure out life post baby. Post birth, I should say. Trying to figure out how to my day to day, and gotta get management involved now and more assistant work because it's like. Now I just got to delegate more work out, because if I want to take on more, I need to delegate more work out. So it's just a learning process, but it's been going, man. It's going.
Has she been sleeping all night?
Well, like now she's sound asleep now.
Mm-hmm.
She's good. She's still doing she sleeps most of the day. she does a thing now called active sleeping that I learned, where like she's sound asleep at night, but she's loud and she moves and she lets out these big cries and then she stops and then, so the sleeping, she sleeps, but she sleeps on her time,
Right.
So, we get like 2 hours here, an hour here. I got like 5 hours the other night and I was like, oh, I'm ready for war. I'm ready for everything.
Right. Exactly.
It's good, man.
I feel 10 years younger.
Literally, yeah. So
Super cool, man.
now I'm just trying to, like, when it comes to work, like finding ways to like be productive and like, I actually got these new speakers, of course, because I thought I was done, and then I actually traded a piece of my silver bullet to a buddy here in town for these Amphions.
Oh wow!
And some cash. So like I've got these two. I got I had great monitoring, but I swapped out my NS10s, and now like with the Amphions, I can mix it like even quicker. So I'm trying to find ways now to, I feel like I've been practicing my whole career ways to work faster but not sacrifice quality, right?
Of course.
At first it was like, well, I just want to have a life, and now I'm like, I only have 8-9 hours max a day to mix now, so now I got to work faster. And I have her up here during the day in this little bouncer over here. So like, usually my wife takes her most of the days, but today I have her in the morning. I have her in this thing. And I got my little sound meter over here to monitor how loud it is in the room. So I just monitor for the first couple hours at like 60 dB max, like, which really isn't that loud in here. And then down there it's probably 55. So like it's safe for everybody and it's safe for me too. And I can get, believe it or not, mixing really low early on in the day, I get so much more work done, if I don't crank it at all. So like, it's nice to be able to work really low. I was practicing that for a while, but now I'm forced to for a while, and it's great. Things translate so much quicker, and my ears are healthier. Well, not really, because I noticed too, she screams, so I have to wear earplugs around the house because she's so freaking loud. But
babies are like that. They like the screams, dude. They're like, oh, where'd that come from?
Wait till you become teenagers, and then the scream gets a whole lot louder.
I've got nieces, but like,
Yeah.
when you're around it 24/7, it's a whole other world. So
Yeah, I was at my nephew's party like a couple of weeks ago, and we're in this like, it's a small room with just like horrible acoustics, and they were doing these chants every time that he would open up a present, and I'm telling you, it was like, just curdling loud. I was like, dude, a gun is quieter than this.
I went to the pediatrician yesterday, so she had to get like just a 1 month checkup, and then one of her vaccinations, whatever. And again, it's a small doctor's office, no treatment. And she started crying like hysterically, which was difficult because it was the first shot. But it was so loud because it was like small things, and I'm like trying to take care of her, but I'm also, my ears are like, I can feel my eardrums pulsing, and I'm like, oh my god, how do people do this? But it's sacrifice.
Yeah, it only gets harder, but better.
It's easier, but it really gets harder. So.
What would life be if it was easy, though?
Right.
Yeah.
Boring,
Exactly.
What's up, Isaac? Sorry, dude.
What's going on, man? What's going on?
I know we did have a few questions.
Yeah, it's a bunch of drum mic questions already.
Yeah. Like I know Brian has a ton of insight for that.
Thanks, Christian. I'm going through the comments. I appreciate it, Christian.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like everything that people are already recommending on there, Beta 52s, 57s, like all those, any of those classic things, 421s, the Earthworks stuff, those are all, solid choices. And I almost would say that it still always comes back to the source. Like, you could mic everything with a 57 and with the right sounding kit, played correctly for the song, you're going to be able to capture everything that you probably would want to capture. But yeah, I mean, kicks, I probably rotate between 52s, 112s, and a D12, kind of depending upon the style. 52 is great, like pop right in the middle, works on everything. I mean, they all work on everything. The D12, I use that a lot for when I really want it to sound as natural of a bass drum as possible. 112s kind of have that scooped thing. So, I mean, if I were doing like a metal project or something, like it really needed a tight, deep kick with a a lot of smack right out of the box. D112 is perfect for that. D6 is sort of, to my ear, like between the Beta 52 and a D112. You know, I think it's got a little bit more hype. But yeah, all that stuff. But I've been using the Muro stuff for a while. I really love the AC8s on toms, overheads, the AC7s. They're getting ready to send me.
We lost you, Brian.
They're getting ready to send. Oh,
you're back now.
Is it back?
Yeah, you're good. I just want to unmute it.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Phone. I got to turn the do not disturb on in a second. I had Muro's going to send me some of their prototypes of some new dynamic mics to try out. So we're excited to hear those. But yeah, I would almost say, like, you know, use the mics that you have and focus on getting the kit sounding right, sounding correct in the space that you have. And man, produce the heck out of that performance. You know, if you need to have a little bit more of a brighter snare, get a brighter snare, tune it, crank it up a little bit, let it ring out a little bit more, you know, that kind of stuff. Like make those upfront choices. And man, the editing, and, you know, again, you know, when my daughter, the first one, was born, I was really focusing in on, like, man, I really have to get stuff done quickly. I've got to make decisions faster, because now the time is it's not mine anymore. So yeah, nail it on the front side, and the mix usually handles itself.
Yeah, the other thing I would add to that too, like and this is kind of a stuff, like everything you said, that'd be my first choice. And then one of the things I realized too, before I was mixing and I was tracking like full time, and as I got like good at tracking and then better, and to the point where I was like, okay, now I'm gonna experiment, I also like would start to experiment. And a lot of times it was like a lot of happy accidents that led me to think like this. But like, you want to get all your close mics right, so you have those. Right. Obviously you need them. Like everything you said is like, I would clone your setup that you just said, like all those mics. But like, I remember once, you know, I was in a studio. It was a nice studio, and we had a oh my god, what's the Neumann's, the small diaphragm one?
KM84s?
Yeah, the 84s, the vintage ones. And I was tracking acoustic guitar. We were at MSR in Times Square, closed down, but it was beautiful. And one of the things about the room, like I was tracking a lot of stuff, and we were doing drums, and I had a 84 set up, going through like probably like, I think at that point it was like a 1081 through like a 76 or something, whatever it was. And I had it, we moved it to track the drums. I guess I moved it over, and I had it recording in by accident. It was up against the wall and shouldn't sound good. The point is that it sounded really good. Like it was just over compressed, and like, you know, I was like, man, it sounds so good. And it was because it was an accident. And then I realized, it was like in those moments I realized, like, you know, it captured the sound of the kit so well. And it was more of an effect, but a lot of times with drum mics too, is once you have all those close mics, a lot of times with a simple microphone capturing the sound of the whole kit. Cause like, especially as a mixer, you know, my thought process of like a drum set is not like, you need those close mics, but it's really good to have a picture of the drum set, right? A picture of the whole thing. And like when I'm mixing a lot of times now, I like to focus a lot on the overheads early on. So like, you know, when I was tracking, I would I would sometimes have like a microphone facing the drums, like a condenser, like a 47 or something that was big and fat, but back a little bit, or like a ribbon or something. So like, I like to add those mics in, or I would at least when I was tracking, because then you kind of get that picture of the drum set, which can be really nice, along with everything that you already said, the close mics and the right drum set. So like, don't be afraid to experiment with backing a microphone up, or like putting a microphone against the wall and compressing it, or doing something out of the ordinary to not only have those close mics, but also have something that's going to capture the whole drum set as a whole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I probably, for a lot of projects that I probably would end up doing the exact same thing, where the bulk of the drum sound is coming from the overheads, maybe a front of kit. I like to do like the Buyer 160 kind of on the front. And man, that's about it. And then when you say, oh yeah, I need a little bit more of the tom on one particular fill, that's when I'll start pulling the spot mics in and stuff like that. I mean, and treating them orchestrally like it is a spot mic. It's not the main mic. You know, it is a full instrument comprised of other little parts. But again, if that's all balanced, and I mean, dude, I've heard so many great things, people recording in their basement, you know, treated, and if you get the main kit mics placed well, it's gonna sound like drums, you know.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think close mics are like, I know early on in my like recording career, like I focused so much on the close mics because, you know, that's what I assumed would be used the most in mixing, and a lot of times it is. I'm not saying that's not the case, but I feel like as I became more confident in my recording skills, and I was like, oh, now I'm thinking more artistically. It's exactly what you said. Like I started in the tracking stage being like, okay, let's really make sure the overheads are capturing, you know, the sound of the kit. Sometimes you didn't want that though. Like it's tough. Sometimes I only wanted the overhead to be cymbal mic, so it depends. But
sure.
It really depends on what you're doing. But like if you're like a drummer who wants to like have a setup to track for a lot of people, and you just you want to set up once and not really adjust them too much. I think overhead should really focus on like the sound of your kit so that you have that, because they're going to be cymbal mics regardless, and then you can in mixing adjust them. If they're close cymbal mics, you kind of locked into that. If they're a little bit higher and in a whole kit, you can. But that's I think the sound of the kit, like when you the individual spot mics are so important, but like I just know maybe it's a me thing, but so many times like I would try the mixing, I would like focus on those, and then you kind of like start to listen to the whole song, and I'm like, it sounds too tight now, or it doesn't sound like the drum sets are in the room, And a lot of times with live drum kits for a lot of records, you want it to sound like the drums as a whole are its own element, you know what I mean? And that's where those room mics and those front of kit. I used to use a 47 in the front of kit, like 2 or 3 feet behind it, up a little. It depends, like up a little bit, like maybe a foot from the kick drum, kind of facing like the toms back, so like kind of get the full.
Are you using the 47 tube or the 47 FET?
I would use the tube for that. The FET out. I would use the FET mostly on the kick.
For the kick, yeah.
On the outside of the kick, I kind of stand. And again, like very privileged working in studios.
Yeah.
It's like that's not an everyday thing for a lot of people. But I would always use a 47. In an ideal world, I'd use a 47 FET on the outside, kind of find where it sounds good. I hate the RE20, but people use it a lot. I never liked it. I would rather a 421 inside the kick. Right. But that was me. That's a me thing. I've heard a lot of great RE20 recordings, and I'm like, I don't know how people do that. I'm terrible. But like a 421 on the inside, or like one of those mics that go in and kind of sit on the floor.
Like the Beta 90, what is it, 98 or something like that?
Yeah, whatever. And then I would do like the Yamaha sub kick, if possible, just to kind of have. And like sometimes it worked great, and sometimes it was just terrible, but that was my kind of thing. Or like I used to experiment a lot with like you have the kick drum, and then you kind of do your setup, and then I would put either probably a FET 47, but I'd take a piano bench sideways and extend it out, put a couple packing blankets over it, and then put and you know what I mean, like that kind of thing, and you get a really cool sound and like
kick tube.
The kick tube.
I would do that, and I'd be like, this is gonna be great. They're gonna love it, and then we do it like. That sucked. You know what I mean? It's like that was stupid. What are they thinking? But at the end of the day, you can get a really good setup with just basic miking, and make sure your overheads are set up right. And a cool.
I used to do the kick tube with a sandbag in the kick drum.
Yeah,
I've heard of that. I've never done that, but maybe I did once. I think a drummer recommended it.
It's one of those that it adds mass to the shell, and anytime when you're taking some type of resonant instrument, I mean, that's why you see like, even on a bass or a guitar neck, when sometimes like they'll sort of do a damper on there, or, that's changing the type of sustain. It might not be adding the same sustain, but it's changing what resonates more, on the instrument. Like you see it on string instruments all the time, where they have like the little mutes that get put on there. Anything that's like affecting the way something resonates, a big old Martin hollow body acoustic versus some of the newer slimline stuff that's out there. I mean, they all, you're changing Yeah. Terry G Fingers, a sandbag. Look up like Simon Phillips video about sandbags or paint cans inside drums.
Yeah.
Jake Reed does that stuff as well. Like he's kind of one of the new hot session kids that's out there, and trying to you figure out how some of these old records were made that sound so good, and they're like, oh yeah, they did this thing. They took the front head off and put a 421 or RE20 in there.
Right.
And, bunch of blankets and like maybe by itself in the room it's not that great, but tracked it does the perfect thing. Like I don't need always a ton of low end booty on it. I just need
nice solid
a thunk. I think that's a technical term. Can you give me more thunk?
Thunk.
Yeah. There's like thunk or thwack or smack is different than thwack.
Yes.
Oomph.
Yeah.
Or like a lot of the jazz guys will call it like a knock.
Yep, give me more knock.
I need a little more knock on it. Yeah.
I know Ali was asking about real drums versus programmed drums, and she was specifically talking about Logic drums. And I'll just say this from my perspective: like there is definitely some drums you could program out there that are mind-blowingly good.
Yeah.
Superior Drummer being one. They did a great job on that, but I don't know. Does it compare to the real thing? No, I don't know. That's just always a personal opinion. At the end of it, like, could you get away with it? For sure. I think if you're a good enough producer,
it's always it's song dependent. Like
it is.
Certain songs, like just need that thing, and it's just like you pull up any new keyboard thing or the what's the one we like, the ARA2, that's that sample patch.
Yeah.
Like you just go to a preset and like sometimes you'll hear a certain sound that's nowhere near organic or natural, but it just has a thing.
It
And you're
inspires.
like, that sound is great. I want to use that. And if that's what makes the record pop off, then perfect. And sometimes, like I think when the question is, let's say Logic drums or Superior Drummer versus real drums, if the song itself really lends itself to real drums, then the answer for me is always real drums.
Yeah.
It's like, do I want a great emulated grand 9-foot grand piano, or go to a studio with a great 9-foot grand, and with a couple C12s, it's like, if you're going for the real thing, if you can get the real thing, get the real thing.
And if it's more of a feel thing, like programming drums versus actually having a real player, one thing you can do is actually what I have some drummers do for me, if they have an electronic kit, is send me the MIDI file. Right. So that way I can change the kit if I need to, but then I get that real drummer feel.
Right.
And
I've got a V drum kit that I use exactly for that, and it's got fantastic sounds. It's like the TD50. It's sort of the Roland flagship.
Oh yeah.
It feels great. For as far as electric drums feeling great, but you capture all that MIDI. And when you want to go back in and you're like, man, that snare, because it's always the snare drum, right?
Always.
Yeah, and then you can just go in and whatever note it's on, and just start, play that feel, and you get the pocket that you want, and then you go through and just
that's the big thing.
Yeah, just getting sounds. But you're definitely right, Isaac. I think it's always the part, even if it's purely synthetic, sampled instruments, and it still has to feel right.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's what I was gonna say the same thing. Like from my perspective, like if I'm mixing, like when I'm mixing and I get sounds from so many producers, like a lot of times sonically I can't tell if it's programmed or live. Sometimes I'm like, oh, this is just recorded really well.
Right.
And it's programmed, and it fools me. And at the end of the day, in the mix, we're trying to get it to sound really good, whatever really good means in the context.
Right.
So, but it's the feeling that I think it's like you were talking earlier, like changing in velocities and things slightly being off. I mean, even it's aside from a handful of like legendary drummers, who are like perfect, which is like unreal. Almost everybody, even the best, there's little imperfections, like anything else that we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, like analog gear, like there's all little imperfections that give it that humanized feel, and that's where I think that's the biggest, like, it's almost like auto-tune, right? It's like when everything is perfect, absolutely perfect, you're like, okay, I can listen to it, it's fine. But there's something about, slight things being off, variations in you know, you were even talking about earlier, like when, and a lot of, I haven't produced in years, but I know, like, certain, sounds now, virtual instruments, all that, like, they have their different velocities and automatically randomize their velocities. But, I think that's the biggest thing for me, is like the biggest giveaway, I should say, is not the actual physical sample. Like, samples sound great. And half the time we're adding samples underneath if we need to anyway. So you gotta use programmed drums. Just make sure you're doing everything to program them like it's a live person, a human playing them. That's the dead giveaway to me.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny because you brought up the snare. I was listening to Creed. I've been listening to him a lot lately. I can't remember the exact song, but the snare just totally stuck out to me. And I'm like, this is a very unique snare. And that's why it always sounds off, because it's like snares like have their, like, every drummer has their own sound,
Right.
Snare and how they record it. And that's where I always have issues with programmed drums. It's always in the snare because it just doesn't sound the Creed.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing also, even with, like, Mike, you were talking about, like, you couldn't tell if it was a real thing or a sample. And it's like, and sometimes getting those great samples added to a track, where it's like the old thing where they talk about, like, spotting a counterfeit. If I gave you a counterfeit $20 bill in your hand, you're probably not going to be able to tell. But if I put 100 of them on the floor with one counterfeit, you'll probably spot that little difference. And it's like, if everything else sounds a little bit loose, maybe slightly roomy, and then you have that one instrument that's like golden in it, then you're like, okay, now this perfect sample that's so great actually can stick out.
Right.
If it's like, it's too good, kid,
Right.
You were talking earlier about, drummers doing spot mics and stuff like that. That's kind of the stuff that I've been getting lately, where drummers are not giving me room mics or giving me, ambient mics or something.
Right.
And to kind of share a technique, and you guys have probably done the same thing, which is mixing a drum kit, playing it through a set of speakers and capturing a space.
Yep.
Sure.
Like a room or something like that, to get that ambient sound. But yeah, that's something that I've been dealing with, quite frequently lately, where some of these guys just don't have enough inputs and they're giving me all spot mics. So,
yeah, I mean, that technique works, and that's the saying about, like, like there's like no creativity without limitations.
right.
And it's like, yeah, you got to figure out a way, if all you have is a 4-channel interface, and you're doing kind of kick, snare, tom and hoping for the best, or kick, snare, overheads, something like that, then you got to find a way to make it work with what you've got. I'd much rather see a young engineer do that kind of a thing and really figure out what they're doing, and then come up with something super cool because they're forced into a situation that they have to make it work. And I mean, I know we've all done this, in the past, where, early on in your career, you're just chomping at the bit to get any gig possible. And then you're like, I'll absolutely mix your record for $7, and then you get probably some suspect tracks that are out there, and you're like, all right, well, I got to make that $7. So, you're sitting there figuring out a way to do it. I mean, even like when I'd see people that would, like, old school thing, like, I just had a pair of overheads, and then they go in and, like, they'll chop where the kick is, and they'll chop where the snare is,
Yep.
and then try to put that on a separate track.
Yep.
And then try to do little EQ things with that, and just to get a little bit more out of it. And I mean, yeah, it's something you got to have those. I think those limitations, which actually are super helpful in being able to grow. I mean, Mike, you're talking about being, working in a commercial facility, probably with like a mic locker that makes people drool.
Yeah.
And you think, I don't know, it's a 1073 or the 1081. I don't know what I'm going to use today.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars in the best rooms in the, like literally I was sharing a room with D'Angelo when he wasn't working in it, for perspective. Like it is
right. And it's like most people don't get into that kind of environment, and so if you be happy that you don't have a lot of gear, kids, because it will make you better.
Yeah.
If you guys want really quick, my computer works, so I can show you something. I don't know if this is helpful or not. So Aaron Sterling is like one of the top.
Oh, dude, he's awesome.
So he's
so good.
I've mixed several things that like he's played drums on, and if you want to just see, hopefully I'm allowed to do this. The song's already out. Pretend that whatever. So like I'll just show you how so Aaron's like a top, literally like. Oh, let me put the baby down quickly.
Be careful.
Yeah.
And she's like, Dad, that snare drum.
Sounds like crap.
Drop out that 300.
It's a little thuddy, Dad.
I know. I'm like, you're not allowed to mix. So like, I'll just show you quickly. Like, so this is a session. This song's been out since last year. The artist's name is Lily Fitz. She's a really great like folk country artist. And Aaron played drums on this song called "I Know What It Isn't." And like when I get drums from Aaron, like I said, he's like the perfect example of like what somebody at the top of the top drummers in the industry would send. So like, like he'll send an overhead. Is it easy to see? I can't tell. So like if I go through his drums, like he's got an overhead. And by the way, these are like stereo stems that he sent. So he already he's recorded them, but you can even see like they're kind of compressed already on the way in. Right. Unless Dan, the producer, did it. But like he'll send, an overhead kit, a kick pointy, a kick boomy. And then he'll send, a snare crack, a snare vibe, a snare buzz.
Yep.
A hi-hat mic, and then someone was just talking about these recently on Instagram, and he'll send like 1, 2, 3, 4 like room mics. Let me see if I can get this to play. So Joyce is one set of room mics, and then it's not that loud in here. I'm not hurting her ears, don't worry. There's one called Orgies or something. There's another set of room mics called, let's see, Almond. So they're all like, there's like 4 sets of stereo room mics.
Wow.
Right? That all are slightly different tones, right? Different mics, different rooms. That's a little brighter. This one's got a little more body. But you'll see like that's literally, and they come as stereo pairs. Now, they don't have toms, they'll have a hi-hat mic. And they sound really good already, but someone at that level, that's how he'll, typically send stuff. And like I've got my processing on them, but like if I bypass, it's probably hard to hear through my phone. But let's see. So like completely raw. The pointy kick. So the point is that he's sending, an excess of files, right, so that in the mix, if we need more points, we can just push that up, right? If we need more boom, we have that.
Yeah, you're not boosting EQ as much. You're actually boosting.
Yeah, and I have stuff on it, like, but it's very minimal stuff. Like I was having fun with this at the time before I got my like this thing, so I can do that with the plugins. Now I was doing it with this because it was kind of cool. I can, see them all at once. But he's sending tracks like that that sound really good on their own, and then when it comes to like the room mics, which are here, some like if you look at the actual waveforms, hopefully it's clear. Like 2 of them are a lot louder than the other 2, so he's already blending them before I even get them. And I even added like a snare underneath, but like it's not. I think it was just like a room sounding snare. Only in the choruses. So like that's how Aaron is sending stuff. And I saw somebody talking about this on Instagram recently about how he sends multiple room mics, and this is just an example of how. And I've done a couple tracks for him that he's played drums on, and he does the same thing every time. I don't know if he moves the mics around. He probably does, but it's a pretty basic thing. But that was kind of cool to share.
Yeah, and I would imagine that everything on there is in time.
Yes.
But that track is it's not on the grid.
So
unless it's already been gridded, but you could even you could hear the feel through the phone, and it's not.
So if I zoom in, this is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a snap. You can see
Good off time.
Yeah, that's on the back side.
And then even to the extent, and this is something that younger people need to fully understand, because I know it took me a little while, but if we look at super technical crap like the waveforms, right? They're perfectly in phase.
Yeah, I was gonna say all in phase.
Yeah, these are his kicks, right? You literally see, the waveforms that are perfectly in phase. So his mics, I don't know his exact setup. I'm sure. His mics are all in phase, so I'm assuming when he's not on tour, this is his drum room. Right, baby? Yeah, she agrees.
Can you go back to show the grid again, Mike, if you wouldn't mind? Because Allie wants to understand what we mean by the grid. And technically, we're just talking about timing. So the grid represents the tempo.
Right. So, sorry, I'm one-handed now, guys.
I know, I saw that too.
I'll take your word for it.
Did I miss something? I totally missed it.
Leave the comment.
Yeah. If you cut this up later, since the comments won't be on YouTube, she said, my ovaries are hurting now.
So the grid is, this is, I don't know how close you can see, but
yeah, look at that.
That's that's the downbeat, right? It's the one. Yep. And you can see how, number one, if you look at the transient, it's not perfectly on the grid. I mean, it's, it's zoomed all the way in. If you zoom out, it's on the grid. But if you look at his tracks, without even really understanding anything, see how they all start at the same place? Yeah. The top track is right here are the overheads. The kicks are right there. They're all lined up. And the thing about drum mics is the hardest thing about drums is, you're getting phase issues. You're getting time issues because, your kick and your snare, especially, which is right up on, your snare is right up on it. It's your transient's going to hit a lot sooner than overheads that are 3 or 4 feet above your cymbals and 5 feet above your snare. So when Aaron's sending tracks, they're already time aligned, right? They're already, and it could be a combination of him doing it himself, but also, he likely, his mics in his own studio are set up in a way that they're probably time aligned as closely as possible. Now, I'll say this, and this is something that I've experienced, and I think I remember seeing a video. I haven't been on TikTok a lot recently, but I know I've seen a video a while ago that Greasy was talking about. He talks about drum mics quite a bit. Obviously, he's really, really good at, he's perfected that art. I remember very vaguely him talking about, someone was going in oh, your drums aren't even, they're not time aligned. And he made a really good point. I'm paraphrasing in my own way that, you don't always want things timed perfectly. Sometimes you do.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of times, especially with room mics, where your room mics are going to be really far off the grid, in terms of milliseconds than your snare, right? And when you line them up, you have to determine what better is, right? Because sometimes you want things to be slightly off. Because the other thing you have to remember is when you're setting up drum mics, regardless of what level you're at, you usually set them up by ear. I mean, I've done the tape measure thing where you 3 to 1 and all that, and you make sure that I've done that. But at some point, I would set them up by ear. And then, if you're setting up a drum set by ear, especially depending on how you're recording, in context of a production, whatever, and then after the fact, you go in and you start aligning everything perfectly. The thing that you really liked about the sound of the drums when you're recording, you can use that. So like Auto Line's a great plugin. There's Arra, whatever. It's all included in Pro Tools now, and that saved me a lot of times for time aligning. But I've also like time aligned drums that I've mixed, and I've time aligned everything, and like finally it's gonna sound great. And then you play it, and you lose everything. You're like, oh, this sounds horrible. Like, and talking
Undo,
about,
undo.
yeah, like talking about that that humanized feel. You can take the humanized feel out of a live drum recording from a line and tight. So like, that's something you want to take with a grain of salt. These are all time aligned perfectly and they sound great. But in my opinion, like phase is more important than time aligning. That'd be like, if and the other thing with phase, I'll just say this, sometimes, like I'm a big believer in all things mixing, but when you're aligning, like one of the reasons I like tracking in studios with consoles is because with drum sets, I'd always have all drums going through an SSL, even if I was using like external knees or something, because I can have them all up in front of me on a bank of 12 faders, whatever it was, and really quickly change the phase of them and go through each one and change the phase. And sometimes out of phase drums sounded really good in context. So like, that's the other thing is when you're recording drums, flip that phase button and listen to what sounds better. This is a good example of drums being in phase. You can really, look at it with your eyes. The waveforms are, let's see if I can get it lined up. Like the waveforms are literally, the peaks and the crest, they're perfect, and they sound really good that way. But sometimes you don't want them in phase. Sometimes you want them out of phase. So don't be afraid to, to experiment with that. But I just thought about that. That's kind of a cool example of like somebody at the top, how they would sing drums, and and those are really great to work with in mixing because then I don't have, there's no fixing that.
Right.
Oh man, how do I get this to work? It's
already done.
Yeah, it's like maybe I want, and then when you have different, like in this case, I had like 4 choices of stereo room mics. So I think one of them was mono, but I had 4 choices of room mics. Like in the choruses, I wanted more room, or maybe I wanted more room in the verses and less close mics so that it can kind of gel more. And then when the chorus came in, I pushed up the close mics so it got really punchy, right? Because there was all these instruments that came in and it was the drums. So like having that option, having multiple options of room mics and overheads and close mics allows you to, in the mixing stage or in production, really adjust the feeling of the drums and all that. So,
yeah, you think about, especially the stuff with room mics, and just remembering what reverb is, and if you're using some kind of a digital verb, you're doing some type of emulation of the reflections in a space. Your first, second, third order reflections. And when you have a room mic that's 10 feet away, that's already catching a sound. You get this sort of time, it's all like the time of arrival type issues. And you catch a sound that's further back. Not only are you getting the tone in that space, but you're getting a sense of depth because it's hearing it later. So you're almost adding in. I mean, it is a natural reverb that's on there. And when you take that 10-foot room mic, and as long as for my ears, as long as you're not hearing something that's like a flam, like when you're hearing, as long as you're hearing it kind of almost, you're elongating the sound.
Yep.
And then, you can do things in like those old 80s tricks where they would trigger a gate on a room mic off of a snare. So the room mic's only opening up on the snare hits and closing back in, and then you just can't like replicate that when you time align something that's 10 feet away. I mean, and I find most people you're putting up a room mic to get that sound because you want that type of a thing. But, I've never intentionally set up a far mic to then line it up right on the hit.
Exactly.
And in fact, the same thing with like, it's like, you don't even have to deal with pre-delay. Your pre-delay is how far away you put that mic. You know,
Right.
that spot mic might be the thing that you're getting the attack and the transient on,
Yes.
but the length and the body of the sound, snare kick, whatever it is being caught on that room mic. So you get all the punch, and then you get the body. But it's like, yeah, when you start lining that up, then all of that goop is now probably more. Chances are it's gonna smear your transient, and you're like, oh, I don't have enough punch. It's, yeah, because
There's another technical term.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking like
Need all those terms.
the nudging tool for us producers. Like nudging is huge.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing is you're pinpointing where the attack is on the transient. And then like you talked about with the room mics, that's more of like the sustain, the decay of what's happening. You know, to line those two up, you're going to mess with the transients. And so like nudging is a powerful tool when it comes to that as well. I use it a lot. I don't deal with a lot of live recordings, but like a lot of times I'm nudging stuff around and like there's a pocket there.
Yep.
You got to use your ears when you're doing it, but it's like, oh, that just opened everything up. And I just nudged it by like 300 samples, which is like, I don't even know if the human ear could detect that timing. It's so fast, you know?
It's a feeling than anything.
It's a feeling. Yeah.
It's pointing there. You gotta feel it. But like, also, I want to add this too because I know Jim actually were able to show. So this is a good example of like, especially because I do this a lot when I get not, you know, like, and if I don't. Okay, so Aaron's tracks, I have options. I can do things for days, and you can overmix it. I can do whatever I want with that, right? But a lot of times I don't have all that. So for somebody who's like producing at home, or even if you just don't have those options, like a good way to show this with timing is this Sound City plugin from UA. I think it's UADX or whatever.
Yeah.
This one, it's great.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's a really good option, and you can literally see like focus, like with the different room mics, like moving them closer and stuff. I mean, this is a great way to kind of show what we're talking about, like how the different mics can, you know, having them further back is more pre-delay, right? So like this is a good plugin to have. Like put it on aux and send your drums to it, and then you know, you treat this as your room mic, right? So like I had 4 sets of rooms from Aaron, so like this would be one room mic, right? This would be another. You have your overhead maybe or something, whatever. Like this is a really good option to like mess around. And like even if you don't have experience in big studios, but you want to know what we're talking about, throw this. If you can even just demo this, right? Like I think it's subscription based. I think this one comes subscription. But like you can literally like solo.
I wish you could do that with the Capital plugin.
It's what?
I said I wish you could do that with the Capital plugin.
I know the Capital one. Yeah.
That one they have fixed
Ocean
points.
Wave, too. I know.
I think the Abbey Road one allows you to move them in space, and maybe the Ocean Way plugin.
The Ocean Way you can move it, but you can't. It's not as
right.
I actually, to be honest, I like the Ocean Way better than this one, but this one's really cool for certain sounds. I'm probably just used to the Ocean Way one. I've used it forever, but like this is a good example of like using different mics, and like, you know, a lot of times I'll just like throw any sound through like this guitar PA Live one, and then
you're getting rid of the gobos in the space, you know.
Yeah, and you know, this is what we would do, and this is your like this is a good kind of, you can see it, this mic right there, that's kind of my front of kick mic, right? Like that's what I would do with the like if these speakers were the drum set, I put my front of kick mic over there and I move that around, right? And now you have, if you're using like, you know, Superior Drummer or whatever, and then you can like, there have been times where I'll create like 4 or 5 stereo auxes with the same input and send my, you know, my drum kit to this and then on each of the, you know, if I do 5 stereo auxes, I'll put an instance of this on each of them, and then I'll have one of them set to this. I'll have one of them set, you know, to these room mics or whatever, and you know, so now I'm actually recreating like a virtual
space.
Like this is what I would do in a real studio if I was tracking. I'd set up mics, maybe not exactly like this, but this is all I can do with it. But you know what I'm saying? So now I have the option of getting those different flavors across a couple stereo auxes, and then, you know, moving them around, and then like experiment with compressing one, experiment with EQing one, experiment with, you know, the different mics that are on here. And like you can kind of like teach yourself to listen as an engineer with just these plugins that you have without having to rent a studio like that I was fortunate to work in 12
Right.
years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like we have these tools now that are they one-to-one with real big studios? Who gives a shit? It's good at what it does. You know,
Right, right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't. So that's what I would experiment with. So when it comes to actually hearing what we're talking about, that's what I would do. And even if you don't have this plugin, like create 2 or 3 auxes and then use, like I like Seventh Heaven, right? The room on Seventh Heaven is amazing. It's my favorite room out there. You know, go to a room and find a plugin with find 2 or 3 reverb plugins that are rooms with different rooms and experiment with pre-delay, experiment with the settings on them, and then you get your different room sounds, and then you can blend those in, and we can do a lot nowadays with what we
for
have.
sure.
It's really cool. That's a really good time with technology.
I've got a couple pieces of sauce for all the kids out there to add on to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like when you're saying you're doing like 2 or 3 different instances of like a Seventh Heaven or any of those, room verb type things, you can also not only play with different delay times, the pre-delay times on that, but also try different things with the panning as well.
Yeah.
And maybe the stuff that's a little bit more near, you pan that more center, not nearly as wide.
Mm-hmm.
And the further back you go, you start to open up that width. Everything doesn't have to be, plus minus 100 on all that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And that's like sort of tip 1. And then the other, let's say you've got an 8-channel interface and you've got kick snare, overhead, pair of overheads, 2 toms, and maybe a set of stereo room mics. And you're putting those room mics 10 feet out. Hit the snare like 1 time and see where that transient lands. And in every DAW DAW, you can measure the time from the close mic to the spot mic or to the room mic. And let's just say that's 30 milliseconds. And you also are so you've got that time now, the delay difference. If you're using, let's say you want to put a plate reverb on the close mics, try using the exact same time of pre-delay on the reverb as it is to the natural room mic.
Yeah.
Oh,
So then that stuff it's like you can get that digital verb effect in addition to the organic room mic, and then they're happening at the same time. You're not getting like transient digital reverb room. I mean, you might want that, but sometimes again, when you get the goop or you get things that start to smear together, you can sort of time align things that way without moving any tracks. You're just getting all the stuff that you're doing for more length and tone and vibe and that stuff. And then you get it to all work together. And probably if you're sending the digital thing, if you can see that snare transient, you look at the wave and then you look at it captured through your room mics, let's say 30 milliseconds later. And if those are in the same phase relationship, but just delay, or the same polarity, but just delayed out, then that when you send that thing to the reverb, more than likely that phase relationship remains the same as well. So it really, but you get the reverb, I've got 40 milliseconds of pre-delay, but the room mics are 30 milliseconds. There's a chance that phase relationship could get, squirrely, but I feel like we just went down a math class.
Actually, great. That's like killer tips, man. Those are the great tips. I just have AI do it for me, so.
It's time to get spicy.
But those are great tips, like especially with the milliseconds. So when you get into doing that stuff, I do it as well. It just blends well, and especially creating that, like, digital reverbs are amazing for stuff like that. To just add that sauce and width and life. Yeah,
you sit there and you think about so many records that I was doing some tracking the other day, and I already knew that the track was going to have these big isolated snare hits with a huge verb on it. But as I'm recording it, I didn't have any verb going in there, and it was just like, gat, and you're like, oh, yeah. I have to imagine what the length of that sound's going to be like. But it's like the verbs are so important, and whether my neighbor listens to the record, they don't know what they're listening to. They just know that, oh, hey, that sounds cool,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, especially a lot of the '80s records. When you think about reverb, like sure. they got super creative then,
Yeah. And again, you had limitations. Mm-hmm. You didn't have the ability to open up my template and have 8 verbs and 7 delays to pick and choose from. You probably had, even in higher end studios, you maybe had a 480L, maybe like an SPX noisy, as they would call them. An Eventide, a harmonizer or something, 2290. That's at a super fancy place. Those old Alesis like micro verbs and stuff.
Quadriverbs and micro verbs.
Yeah, and you had to sit there and pick and choose and then make a decision on it and print that. And then because you had to use that verb again, for vocals or guitar solos or something like that. You have 11176. Well, I can't put that on every track, Pick
and choose, what was important?
I think about that so often these days. I just know this to be a fact. When it comes down to like us making decisions as humans, the more options we have, the harder it becomes.
Oh, of course.
And so when you limit yourself, this actually ends up, you blossom. It's almost easier. And then you could bring in an abundance, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because you've developed this deep understanding. But I think about this often. And like I did that post today too, talking about it. But like, I'm like, it just hit me with the comment that the person made about the manuals, and I was like, I actually think a lot of us are, instead of reading manuals these days, we're just going to Google and YouTube first.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go, this is an abundance of information. I don't care what, you could find what you want to hear. We'll just put it that way. Right? Like there's going to be all kinds of information pulling you back and forth when go to the manual. It's going to tell you exactly what it is. It's like,
I'll Google up right now looking at something. Yeah.
Well, and something that's really important with manuals, there's so many people, and specific to like UAD.
Yes.
The UAD, not only will they tell you what all the presets are and every parameter that you can adjust, but it also, because again, like there's, and I'm not saying that it's false necessarily, but UAD and the zero latency with plugins kind of comes into play if you're tracking through UAD hardware. Right. But if you're using it as an instance while mixing, a satellite, or if it's UAD, satellite will do the processing, UADX uses the host processor, but you'll look on there and it will give you the actual latency times on all of their plugins. I mean, you are going to add latency in there. So maybe there's a chance that, you've got delay compensation working if your DAW can support that. But that's something like it's down in the weeds and kind of like a lab coat material. But yeah, you're sitting there wondering why, like, oh cool, I added this 480L reverb on something and I like the sound, but something else is happening, along the way that you're like, oh, okay, it's acting weird. And I know now how to compensate for that because I read the manual.
It's huge. It's huge to do that. Like, and that's like, oftentimes I'm sure people are running into this stuff and just unaware, and that's the unfortunate part when it comes to decoding what could be the thing that is causing stuff to go haywire, because there's just so many. And that's why it's important to limit the tools, because if you limit the tools, then you're going to understand each tool, and that'll make it easier to address any issues that may arise when you're working on your mixes.
And that's why I kind of like doing live sound sometimes, is because you have to make quick decisions and you're limited by whatever you have in front of you. Sometimes you're not with a band that has the budget to have everything. You're just kind of like, well, this is what I got. We got to make it sound great.
Yeah.
And so you're making quick decisions. You're thinking quick on your feet. So then I take some of that and bring it here into the studio with that same type of mindset. It's like, well, this is what I have. What can I do with it? How can I make it sound great based upon what's in my hands? And then when you're also traveling around as an audio engineer and you're dropped into different studios, you don't know what that studio is equipped with.
Yeah.
And that's where this whole thing of, learning and exercising and figuring out what it is, what each of the tools can do, so that when you're dropped into these situations, you know how to operate in each one of those situations. Just because, who was it? What I was listening? I was listening to somebody, another audio engineer on here, and he was talking
Rich?
about. Yes, it was. I
Yeah.
think it was Rich, and he was talking about a plugin. Some guy blowing up because he didn't have some plugin, and it's like, you need to be able to make stuff work, whatever you have.
Dude. That is. And I heard that post, and y'all can go and look. We'll get his account and we'll tag it on here. But I was embarrassed to hear that. I mean, that is some and he called it coast splaining, and he probably means some West Coast, more than likely coked out dude that's like, man, I can't work unless I have digiverb.
Right. Yes.
This is like, where I come from. It's like, shut up.
He's like,
dude.
your studio's not a professional studio if you don't have this. It's like,
dude, it's you just suck.
Yeah.
As we're getting ready to get salty with some of this AI stuff and that, like,
I'm
more
glad-
than likely that dude is complete hot trash and has probably charmed his or her way into that position rather than skill set, or potentially more, I would imagine, maybe bullied his way into that. And again, it's like, who talks like that?
Yeah.
I don't know about everybody's background, but Robin, maybe I don't know, like, if I was younger, that might be a punch in the face.
I was gonna say a punch in the face.
You know what I mean? Like, dude, if I ever said anything like that, I mean, I would expect to get clocked.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
100%. And
I'll say this too, like in terms of like I totally agree. Like when it comes to traveling to different studios, like I remember before AAX, like the football was 11. 10 before that, they were using the old TDM cards, and like every studio had waves, and I used to use all the waves because that was what everybody used, and I'd go studio and it was easy. And then when AAX came about, and they got rid of the old cards, and then waves suddenly wasn't running off the DSP anymore, and I literally simplified everything down to like the stock Avid EQ and the stock Avid compressor.
EQ7, man.
And like,
all you need.
And I forced myself, at that point of my career to like, this is what I'm going to use. And I eventually I got really good at just using those things. And like, what's cool about that is if you look at, there's that whole thread online with Serban, right? It's like 100,000 pages, and John Haynes if you don't know what I'm talking about on Gearspace, there's a whole thread about like John Haynes, who is, works with Serban and so on and so forth. He goes into detail about their workflow, and basically it's as simple as possible. It's like metric halo channel strip. Right. Everything goes out of 1 and 2, whatever, but it's very basic. And then I took a master class with Manny American earlier in the year. Manny's still on the console, but it's basic. It's not, I'm not talking, he doesn't have all these, it's like barely even this parallel stuff anymore. It's like basic. So at the top level, the top 0.1% of these mixers, they're basic, right? So getting down to like the basics is like, we have to go through this process. Everybody has to go through this, where you kind of learn the basics, and then you kind of like overdo it, and you used to use way too much. You're like, I can't work without this, and I can't work without that. And like, not that I was never that kind of a diva, but like, there was a point where I'm like, oh my God, like I need more. I need something else because I don't have enough. I'm not going to be as good as so-and-so because I don't have this. And then I hit a point where I circle back around. I'm like, yo, just give me a channel strip and I'm good. Like, all I need is an SSL channel strip and a reverb and I'm good. Like, I'll make it work. And that's kind of where everybody has to experience that. So like, eventually, like I can mix a record with the stock Avid EQ and compressor because I did it so long. traveling between studios, and you just get really good at it. And the basics is all that you really need at the end of the day. It's really getting good at the basics. It takes time.
Yeah.
Like, that's really all you need. You don't need a million plugins.
The truth.
No. Yeah, and that's one of those things that, you know, specific to, you know, that dude, it's like, it doesn't even get to be a dude. You don't get to have dude status. Dude status is reserved for cool dudes, you know, like we're douche status, you know. But that's probably the kind of guy that he's like, oh, cool. Now I've got a scapegoat, you know, for the talent to sit there and say like, you know, it wasn't me. It was, they didn't have that one plug-in, so, you know, it wasn't my fault that I didn't coax the best performance out of you or make good practical musical decisions. It's like, you know, that stuff's that's silly.
That's a wise observation, because that's the truth. You know, that's the deep truth behind it. That's what that guy was doing. He was finding a scapegoat.
Yeah.
And you know, like, I'm glad you brought up Rich, because he chimed in on the conversation, AI conversation. And he said to me, probably the most important thing to understand. AI only mimics what we've already done.
Right.
And like, when you're well aware of that, it's this catch up. Will it pass us up? Maybe one day, maybe, possibly, you know, but as of now, it's only taking things we've already done and it's analyzing the spectrum of great mixes, maybe within that genre from the past.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what it's recreating that. And so, you know, and going back to like all the stuff we've been talking about, and I think the strongest point is like, we've never needed it to begin with. We've always been making incredible music without it.
Yep.
Right.
You know? And like, I think the truth is like, for anybody to understand it, is don't utilize it to replace any positions. Utilize it to help, you know, because at the end of the day, it's not going to play the position a highly experienced engineer or mastering engineer, mixing or mastering. These guys are just incredibly talented at decoding problems. And when it comes to music, it's within the imperfections, as we discussed, of
course,
the things off time, you know, and the transients and this and that. And there's just no possible way that a computer would be able to map all that out and do it more efficient than us.
To me, the best form of sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say, like, the best. I gotta go in a second. She's about to cry. The best form of AI so far are like the things that can help us, like AI that can help prep vocals and like clean up vocals and even out, like things like that, where it can analyze. And they're starting to do that already. Certain companies that I've been experimenting with, they're not all great yet, but like being able to like import a bunch of audio files and then clear them out and even them out, things that like an assistant would need to do, right? Even like making stems, like technically it's not AI, but it kind of is in a way. It's like the beginning of it, like doing things that can save us time. That's not necessarily replacing creative parts of the process, but more of like the tedious parts that, you know, allows us to stay in that creative mindset longer. I think that's where AI is really great.
Absolutely.
But I don't know. We're gonna look back on this in 20 years.
More kind of task oriented type stuff rather than the creative process.
And save us money, because if I can employ people and get them work, that's great. But I also, it's also costs money for an assistant, and it costs money for people to do that stuff. And it's useful one way or another, but we're all trying to save money at the end of the day. So I got.
Oh, sure.
It's time to eat. So,
Mike, thank you, buddy. Have a good one.
See you, Mike.
Enjoy the baby. I was going to say this too, real quick, because like, there's all kinds of stuff happening in our industry, right? And I had a discussion with a good friend of mine he's huge, big time producer, bigger. I wish to be him one day, but he was saying this when it comes to like shows and like how the industry is going with bigger acts, right? Like, I'm not talking about people that like are from like the 90s or 2000s. They kind of did like the older method, right? Like more of what's going on today in the names in hip hop and whatnot, right? That they're going out and they're scheduling out these tours, and they don't necessarily have big names in the cities, and they're not bringing out that local acts that have names in those cities.
Right.
This used to be an old practice. That's how you could pack shows, and then you'd share fans that way, and you experience exponential growth. And so a big act just had to cancel her tour because only sold like I think 17% of the tickets that were needed to be sold, and it was a direct result of this. Right. And I'm like, are we changing, or are we fixing things that aren't broken? You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
And it's happening all over the place, and I'm like, that to me that's a message for myself, so I could recognize it and like stay out of that, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I'm definitely going to utilize new tools if I can, but I'm not going to fix something that isn't broken. If it's working, if it's proven to work, if we have a map that we could follow, like why wouldn't we? And I think about this stuff a lot.
I think that there's this is a kind of a repeated theme, for these episodes, but there is a thing if, you're talking about like abundance, and it's also the speed at which the abundance comes in. It's too much, too fast, for a lot of younger engineers that have all the desire that, it's different than when I grew up. I just didn't have it. I had to wait. I had to wait for Saturday morning cartoons and next season for something to come out. Mm-hmm. And now that you can get anything available at your fingertips, and then you're inundated and overwhelmed with so much information. And this is like, about your post, and I don't even know who the mixer was that was on there talking about, I just, run the AI thing on my master, to see what that has a high potential of creating probably more confusion than being helpful. And I'm pretty sure that, not pretty sure, I'm making a guess that post is not really meant to be truly educational. Mm-hmm. It's designed to promote that individual as a mixer, as a producer, or whatever it is. And it's like, if you don't know what, again, those basic fundamentals are, you're throwing something that could be highly destructive. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I'm looking at it and then I make sure that it's flat. Like, okay, when, again, as the old head, and I'll be politely salty, when I'm watching that and hearing him speak, I'm like,
what,
dude? Like, yeah. I'm full of questions, and I'll always leave room for maybe it's me that I don't understand. But I think in this context, I get it because I've seen this so many times where, what did you need that for? Like,
100%.
It's like, is your room reasonably balanced, or you're monitoring off of headphones, or whatever the case is? Like, and now I'll go as far as to say is like, sometimes like I'll have an RTA on a mix bus, or if I'm doing something mastering, I use Wavelab a lot, and I'm always looking at, the frequency graph and stuff, and that's more helpful. That if I'm hearing something, and you can look at it and see like, in the moment where I'm hearing that low end thing, that you see something really kind of peak up, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of letting me know that, what I'm hearing is correct, and there's probably something that needs fixed. Like I did that Porter's Gate master, and it was like electric bass, piano, organ, and 2 vocals. Beautiful song. And there were just a couple spots that, like, a couple of the bass notes really, really stuck out and should have been fixed in the tracking or in the mixing phase, but it left to me in the mastering. So like, I'm hearing it and I'm using that tool to confirm what I'm hearing. And then I go in and I had just a little like dynamic EQ that just nudged those three notes that were being played. And like, that's fine.
Totally.
But I've been doing this for 30 years. Like, I know what I'm doing, and I would never recommend that somebody young do that. Because, it's like...
Yeah, I think like
if you don't know what you're doing, you could really be like, I'm got to try to, flat. And I mean, and Isaac, both of us do a lot of live sound. Flat sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want
Flat
I
to
don't want
flat.
anything flat. You know, I mean, if I have to do something, if I go do a big PA show, and I might flatten the system to match the room,
Right.
but then I'm still EQing. So yeah, and that's
Enhance and hype.
That's no different than me treating and tuning my mix space. I'm dealing with the acoustic anomalies, but when you're putting that AI plug on your mix bus, that's not the space. You know, that's the track.
Right. True.
You know,
very true.
That's not what you're hearing. That's what it's reading off of that digital file, which is very different.
It's that
you know,
taking
and
your space into account and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's many points from where that sound hits that, RTA, which is really probably what he's talking about. Is it's not an AI EQ necessarily, unless he's saying hitting some button that alters the EQ. Maybe he might just have been reading it as an RTA, real-time analyzer.
That's what it does. It's actually an AI that will analyze your mix
and then make a
EQ curvature of the EQ and tells you this is how you fix your mix.
Right.
And I'm like,
it's like, yeah, like, it'd be one of those things where there's like some 3K spike on something, and it's like, oh, that's out of the realm. It's like, well, I might be doing a classical record that has a piccolo solo on it, playing a single note, or an oboe in 1812 overture where you like goes,
it needs it right there.
Right.
yeah. It's like, and if I just relied on that to, the computer told me to fix it. Like,
and
it's so silly.
That's the only thing, like, you hit it on the head, man. Like, that was the only thing I wanted to encourage, was specifically the people learning, the beginners, the ones that are like still trying to develop the techniques and the skill sets to get good at this. And I just know that, like, I mean, I don't know how much more basic I could put it. It's like when we cheat on a test, when we're copying someone's paper, are we really learning? It's just that, you know what I mean? And like, and then you even said it, like, we could go back to Rich, what he was talking about with this guy coming in, now trying to use a scapegoat plugin because in his mind, he knows I can't really mix.
Right.
And so what did you do? Did you skip the process? It sounds like it.
Right.
And like, put me in any space, I can mix a record. I don't care what it is. I don't care what you give me. I'll figure it out for sure. And I know both of you will as well. And that comes from years of experience.
As even some of this, what is it? AI mastering, right? Websites and things like that. I've sent some of my mixes through there just to kind of see, like, what does it do? How close is it? And one of the things that I noticed was it never felt right to me.
Totally.
Like it would EQ in a certain way, carve out things, and I was like, I don't like that. Right. I don't like what's coming back at me. And the other thing with mastering, and like you just said, sometimes you'll put a dynamic EQ just to treat a note or something like that while you're mastering, rather than it being like a full-fledged EQ across the whole board. So that's where, learning this technique, learning this tool, we now put a human touch on it. And as we're listening to these things, we're going, okay, this is what it needs here. This is what it needs here. And this AI mastering still hasn't gotten that figured out yet. It just kind of is putting this blanket EQ, blanket compression. And it's some of it, I'm not going to say all of it, but some of it does destroy the mix.
Yeah. And I tell you, like, when I master projects, I tell you, I do so much more in the old school way of leveling and simply turning things up and down. And I might even do automation on things to drive more volume, even before any type of processing, just to simply drive more volume, let's say going into a chorus where I hear the song naturally want to build, and then like I'm bumping that chorus up a half a dB, just something to give you
the ears kind of
to give you the sensation of it, rather than being an obvious, it's way louder here. And just doing that stuff, instead of like hardcore limiting, then clipping, and then another comp, and then another. I got to use my 19 orange, blue, pink, teal, aqua clippers, like, and then you're like, man, the mix has no punch, and like the fret sound from an acoustic guitar is as loud as a snare hit or a lead vocal. I'm like,
look, I'm just trying to get my bass to sound like Rob's bass. I don't.
It's just
junk in my trunk, man.
You've been hitting the squat rack,
I actually got a violation because I wrote that on your thing. They came back with yeah, they're like, this comment was, against our community guidelines. I'm like,
I won't say that again, I guess.
yeah.
yeah.
It's just so important that, like, at the end of the day, that we're learning what we're doing and then using the tools.
Yes.
It's just so important. I just can't stress it enough. And the tool, like, some of these tools to me from some of these plug-in companies, I feel like are just for sales, just to make money.
Oh, it totally is.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it comes down to compression, EQ, volume.
Yeah, period. It's
And verb. Sorry, verb.
Yeah, the effects are for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
but like you're right. That's the basics. That's all you need. It's just very, very simple stuff. Doesn't take a lot. It really doesn't.
Yeah, and it's the sort of that having some compassion for that producer that couldn't mix without his whatever it was, it's the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You feel like maybe you don't belong or something like that. So that was his way of compensating for it, was like going over the top and, flexing what he didn't have. But
Which, I mean, that studio was pretty well equipped. So, I mean, regardless
Yeah,
if he didn't have, I mean, like, you could have made something work.
hey, oh, by the way, Rude Boy. Yes, of course we take questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to say this real quick. Isaac and I briefly spoke about it yesterday. And I'm sure you did this as well, Brian, but you did like ear training for frequencies.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know if that's like a thing anymore. And then
Probably not.
two is like, I see this so much because it's plug in this, plug in that. Like what vocal chain do you use? What microphone do you use? Like if you're an engineer,
template.
you should be asking about what monitors are we using? How did you get your room flat? What converters are you using? Like these are the things that are really, really good, that are going to work for you. And I just know it. I feel like it's a ready, shoot, aim mentality.
Right.
That,
Right, yeah, right.
it's kind of a little backwards.
I had to do the math. It's like, oh, that's backwards. Right, I got you.
Yeah, it's a little backwards, and like the for an engineer, just understand that it is so important that not only are your monitor systems as accurate as you could possibly get them, that if you cannot hear it, you can't fix it. It's that simple. And then training your ears. This is like I know for a fact it did wonders for me. I spent like a year doing it, and like him and I were even talking about it. Like I remember they would give me the 30 hertz. And I'm like, I can't hear it, but I could feel it. It like would vibrate my eardrum a little bit. Yeah, there'd be a little vibration. And now I could like pick up on these things. And it just, this is the stuff that works. It's all the basics.
That's where doing a lot of live sound and ringing out monitors.
Oh, yeah.
Like you start to hear that, really quick. And
You can start calling out frequencies just like
yeah,
that.
and even and I'm not somebody that's going to be like, oh, that's 2497.
Yeah,
I'm roundabout. I'm not like exact.
Yeah. It's and that's, I think that it's something that, being that frequency is effectively infinite. There's hertz between the hertz.
Yeah.
But just like even learning, like 100, 1K, 8K is a big one. Like just knowing where those little things are and saying, okay, I hear it up there, and then you get closer to it, and your ear will develop. Like you don't even have to learn that much on there. But I think there's a lot of people that would be like, if you'd ask them to give you 100, more than likely they're going to give you 50 or 250, and just like not knowing where that is. And even when I was tuning MySpace, like I would still go through and I'll just put a signal generator on and start sweeping through the room. And I actually did this on a live gig the other day where I had a younger A2, and I was just sweeping frequency through the PA, going through the room, listening to where the room resonated. And I'm like, okay, yeah. Because I kept hearing something like, yeah, it's like 125-ish around there. And it was like 130. And then I just go into in the PA. Like I can't stop the room from resonating, but what I can do is cut that out of the main matrix going to the PA.
Right.
So I'm not, I'm not activating it. I'm not triggering it and exciting that, So if it's already going to resonate in the room anyway, I don't need to add to it. In fact, I need to take away, because again, I can't stop it from happening. I can just stop it from happening out of the PA. So hopefully if that's resonating and the PA is dipped in that frequency, then it should still come out balanced.
Yep.
But again, it's in the A2 that was with me, he's a great kid. He's like 25 or something, but he was like, I've never seen anybody do that before. And I'm like, oh, now you have. And now you have, like, it's a cheap, free trick in your toolbox, but also like knowing in your room, like where you're seated, you can do the exact same thing. Just put a signal generator mono and just start sweeping. And then you'll probably have one or two things that happen. And also can probably hear where your ears start to tingle to maybe a frequency that you're sensitive to, or if you're a little older, you get that 4K dip. They say when you're over 40, you just start to lose that bit.
Yep.
But you also might hear where, as you're sweeping, where the tone just drops out, and you found, okay, there's a null point, in your space. So know that if you're not getting, and in my room, it's like 110. So I'm very rarely ever boosting on anything I'm mixing in my space at that frequency.
Yep.
And because I know that if I can hear it, and if I can hear it abundantly, I'll probably still cut it, because I already know that, like, man, if I'm hearing it in a space where it's naturally attenuated, man, and then I'll do the thing, and maybe I'll check the RTA, on that particular track or on the overall mix, and just but those are the basics. But I'm still, like, after 30 years doing this, like, I'm still relying on those, and having that amount of experience to know that is, you're never going to get there, but having time, in the mix chair, or if you're a stander, if you like the mix carpet or whatever you like to do. But yeah, it's like, there's no 5 easy tips for that. There's no quick fix for it. There's no other way other than just time and, impact on your ears to know, like, yeah, that feels weird. Or I don't know, you guys, Isaac, you probably worked in some other, like, larger commercial places as well. Like, when you walk into a room and the air feels different, and you were like, yeah, I bet you this is going to sound good in here. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can go to a space, or you can go into a venue and you clap your hands and it's like,
yeah, everybody goes, what are you doing? I'm like, listening for the reflections.
Yeah, you'll hear that and you'll be like, all right, this is, I don't need reverb in here.
Yeah, you're like that.
It's like
flutter echo going on.
The room has enough anyway, but
that's Dan's room. It's the most beautiful reverb I have ever heard in my life. And you walk in there and it's like, dude, it's a magical room. I worked with Matthew Weiss back in the day, and he brought this concept to me, and I fully understand it now. But he would describe sounds as shapes.
Okay.
And I think that this is kind of a good technique for beginners, because when you start to understand how sounds are shapes, and, like, for example, a bass would be round.
Yep.
A hi-hat would be like a triangle, right? And then we could get into the nuanced stuff of what would create a square. But you know, you got like essentially those three shapes, and you're kind of trying to fit them in like a puzzle piece when you're breaking down your mixes.
Right. Sure.
And it just makes perfect sense for me because like I was in a music review earlier today, and right off the bat I was saying like the vocals are too sharp, and they're saying, well, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, well, the sharp transients of the vocals are poking out above the hi-hats.
Right.
And it just like, and that was particular to the track. Sometimes you have it in reverse. It just depends. But in that particular track, I was like, it sounds disjointed. It doesn't sound like it's glued together. Right. You know, and they're like, how do you hear that? And it's just like, I just perceive sounds as shapes. And so I could kind of isolate the vocals as the sharp transients, and like typically your S's, your T's, the plosives. And then I listen to the levels of them, and my ears will tell me right away, like those need to be tucked back a bit, you know? And so like when you start to understand the tracks like this, like you could almost easily detail out how to get it to fit together and glue where at least sounds somewhat cohesive.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty, it's way more common than we might think. I mean, people like, you know, talking about a round sound or something has too much point on it, you know, or the same kind of thing of like, you know, edgy might be something that you would say is a square shape. You know, it's like not just a triangle where it might be like an instant thing and then it dips away. It's like edgy is just pointy all over. That sounds really jagged or that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
I think we totally perceive that. You know,
I mentioned to you that when I teach the audio like frequency course, the segment that I teach, what I do is I play a bunch of different test tones through pink noise, and we boost the frequency, then we cut the frequency, that kind of stuff. And what I tell most people to do is so that way I don't imprint what I hear. I tell them like, you find the frequency and tell me what it sounds like to you. Some people would say some of the high frequencies sounded like their cat hissing. Somebody said it sounded like an air compressor. It sounded, or, you know, hey, remember when you would put your head against the side of the car and your mom was driving or something? You'd hear that, low rumble. That's what that feels like to me. So then I was like, now start associating those sounds or those textures of that description to now listening to music. And if we can do that, then you can find those frequencies that you're looking for because you're going, oh, yeah, that was, you know, right around that 250 area because that's what that felt like to me.
Right.
So I love it.
There's a question on here. Your Mova is asking about, do we know anything about taking live production to like recorded film audio? And I said yes, and then they're asking, how do you do it? So just to clear, are you asking like how to take to sort of sync film to audio? Is that the question? And then
I saw Rude Boyd had a question earlier about compression.
Oh yeah, so we got like three. There's a comp thing. There's there's audio layback, and then Jennifer Albert is begging for help, which I don't. Happy to help, but I don't know what the question is. So what do we want to handle first? What was the?
I think who was it? The compression. Yeah, Rude Boy, the compression one was first. Either one of you can take that. That's.
I'm looking for it here. And then there was something about headphone monitoring, or.
It says, what is the most important in a compressor? The attack or threshold or even ratio? I still don't get it.
Threshold?
They all kind of work together in a sense. Yeah. I mean, like one kind of feeds the other kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like attack and release don't mean anything until the threshold is hit.
Right.
Totally.
You know, so I'd say
ratio is dependent upon how much audio is going over that threshold.
Well, we could do this real quick. We could go back to the shapes, and you could think of the attack and release as a shape.
Sure.
So the faster the attack, the faster the release, the sharper the sound. Right. And then slower, the rounder. And so that's how I would apply my attack and release, depending on how I want to mold the sound. And then ratio would technically be how much compression you're applying. So those are
Yeah.
just different functions of them. But yeah, that's how I think of compression.
Yes, I guess if we put a button on that, yeah, they all matter for sure. And I think what's also really important always in the compression conversation is why. Like, what are you using it for? I mean, and I will definitely I'll use compression for two totally different things, and one of it is really more the classic sense of leveling and trying to get the dynamic range of a particular instrument or the overall performance a little bit closer together, to reduce like extreme peaks and extremely low level things. So trying to sort of squash down the loud stuff so the stuff in the middle is a little bit closer in its relationship. And that's especially live stuff as well. I'll do pretty abundant compression across a lot of channels, but it's all happening very lightly. And this is predominantly just to catch peaks, especially in a performance where you can't go back and redo it. Somebody might just hit something too hard, and just to sort of clamp down on that so nothing is sort of poking out of the mix. Right. Without radically changing the tonality, and then so the second half for the comp kind of thing is if you're not doing it for peak control, or maybe it's peak control, but you're also doing it for tonal things. I mean, electric bass is a classic example to where really compressing that down, the front end attack allows it doesn't necessarily increase sustain, because the sustain is only going to be as long as the sustain is long.
Right.
But when I can have less of an impact up front and bringing that down, so if your sustain is here and your transient is like this, if I can make it all sort of one, maybe a little bit of attack, then you get the impression that there's more sustain because you don't have that big peak on the front side, so you can hear more the decay of the note.
Decayed, yep.
Right, and you can squish that decay down and then turn the whole thing up, so the tail end of decay is artificially louder. If you're looking again to make a rounder sound, but yeah, and there's things also like with slower attack times will allow more of the transient to come through. And I mean, I usually on a like snares, toms, kick, those really percussive things, sometimes piano, I'll have a slower attack because I want that initial hit to come through, and then saying, okay, at whatever this peak here is minus 20. And I have it set for minus 20.5. So whenever that hit happens, the compressor kicks in. Do I want it to instantly clamp that, or do I want it to, it's going to kick in, but if it's 20 milliseconds delayed, it says, okay, now I'm on, I'm waiting to turn on, the transient has happened, and now it's pulling everything else down. You put it faster, it's going to say instantly on and turn that down.
It's like a game of whack-a-mole.
Yeah. It's a bit of whack-a-mole, that's for sure. I mean,
so the knee will actually,
right.
How am I going to explain this?
It's like a fader.
Yeah, it's like the more of the knee it becomes a brick, right? A brick wall. Right. So now the transient isn't getting through, and then the less of the knee, the transient starts to poke through a bit more.
Well, you have the knee and the ratio are linked together.
Yeah,
if you've got 3 to 1, meaning that for every 1 decibel above the threshold, it takes, or sorry, for every 3 dB above the threshold, you'll get 1 dB louder. And so people also think that compression is going to turn stuff down. Like, you'll still get increased volume on things, but it's just how much above the threshold does it take to get me 1 more, So 3 to 1 means it has to be 3 dB above that to get 1 more dB out of it. And the knee, the rounder the knee, it's you're increasing the time for that ratio to get to its full effect. You know, if you have a hard knee, it's going to be 3 to 1 right away. A soft knee, you'll see it starting to compress, but by the end of the knee is when you get the full amount of your ratio coming through. Nerd.
Christian said it perfect. I thought the knee was to fine tune the ratio. I like that's like a really, really easy way to put it.
It's like, it's how fast does the ratio go to its full level?
Yeah, it's just another feature for the ratio. Exactly.
Correct. Yeah, and soft knee is smoother. You'll hear less compression on a soft knee.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yep. Yeah, those are great questions.
Do we want to attack the headphone monitoring? Any recommendations on headphone monitoring?
Absolutely. Sure. I thought I heard a dog. I heard a little click, 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 click.
Yeah, it's
I knew it.
It's my corgi. She keeps running in and out of here.
Super cool. As most of y'all know that join me, I do a lot of mixing in headphones, and personally, I use the Sennheiser HD6 open back. Super good for just all around. There he goes. He's got them. They have a roll off at like 15 hertz. Great to get to the sub frequencies. That's why I got junk in the trunk. And however, I do have my eyes set on the Sony MDR MV1s. And the reason why is because HB, he called me, I don't know, a month ago or so and told me about them. They roll off at 5 hertz and they're open back. And
interesting.
He preaches for them. So like, I'm probably going to add those to my tool belt, eventually. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily need to. I'm very happy with the Sennheisers. They do me justice.
Yeah, I have the Bayer 770s, I think is what I use.
Yeah, these are the 1990s Bayer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're basically closed back. It's slightly ported. They're very comfortable. So I think there's two things to really think about in any headphone conversation.
Look at your specs.
There's that. Read the manual.
Sure. Yes,
but
the manual.
There are a type of headphones that are great for mixing and type of headphones that are great for tracking. Like the classic tracking headphone of like the Sony 5906, you can get them for $100 a pair.
Or even the AKG, what is it, 290s or something?
Yeah. And they all have kind of like an enhanced upper stuff. So you get a lot of like 2 to 5K boost. Mm-hmm. And that's like when you're tracking and you're really trying to like hear where a lead line or a melody is. It makes it easier to hear that, in the headphones. And I've mixed on them before, but it wouldn't be my choice for mixing. They're not necessarily what I'd consider to be accurate, and that's, they were sold as like radio DJ headphones and then adopted into like the tracking world, for individual instrumentalists to be able to hear. And you can drive them really loud as well. It's just like thinking about those kind of things. So whether it's and you can find really great mixing headphones for not a lot of money.
Totally.
Like even those 1990s, I think they're maybe $500 or $600, which might be on the more expensive side. But you can the 770s are 300 and change, something around that.
I got them for during Christmas, and I got it for like $100.
I think I got mine for 100 as well. I got those.
Yeah. So, and they're pretty flat, pretty smooth.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this: they sounded, which was super crazy. They sounded very similar to my General X.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah.
When I put them on and I took them off, I was like, wait a minute, that's really darn close. Right. There was a little bit of a high frequency difference, but it was really, really darn close.
I mean, if you're on a budget, for me, any advice, the primary consideration is, are they hyped or not?
Right.
Like,
That's what I said, reading your specs. Cause
yeah, in any way. So if you know they're hyped, then you know they're hyped. But you'll still have to get used to that. So if you know it's hyped in the low end, maybe you can sit there and say like, yeah, I don't want to boost anything that I'm hearing on the low stuff because it's already probably boosted to your ears. And then as you progress a little bit further, then it's certainly the amplification that goes to the headphones. That comes into play, because if you can look at what the ohm rating of a headphone is and making sure that your amplifier or your headphone amp is matched. So when you can do cool things with impedance mismatching on a microphone. A lot of those things will have an impedance button, and you can alter the tonal characteristics because you're not providing it the desired power that it wants. But if you have a mismatch on the headphones, then, one, you have a chance of blowing them out. But also you might be adding like electrical harmonics on there, which again, you're going to have like a false, listen. So if you get a decent headphone amp, or you've got an interface with a decent headphone amp, that's cool. And then probably the last bit then again is the conversion. Because you're always listening it's going D to A. So you could have you could have these 1990s or a pair of $2,000 Grado headphones or something, and if you're monitoring that through
focus rate,
less than and those are fine for a lot of stuff, but when you're really trying to hear details, that might end up getting a little bit suspect. So you just have to, again, know what it is you're working with, and know it's like, am I hearing that, or is that the gear? It's the same thing. Like, am I hearing the room resonate, or is that actually coming out of the speakers?
Just to segue, because I think that this is important, just everything you're talking about when it comes down to like how headphones are tailored, right? Like my Sennheisers, I love, because I could get to the extreme low end, and then I find it to be really accurate up until about 5K. And then 5K and the Sennheisers are a little wonky to me.
Right.
And it's probably because they're open back, and this just the sound is leaving them, right? And then when we get into like closed back, I have the Audio Technica M50Xs.
Right.
These things are like $150, and I find these to be like pretty accurate from like 2K and up.
Okay.
They're extremely tailored in the low end.
Right.
And so I would not make any moves in the low end when I use these. And I don't technically ever really have to get into these, but like if I find myself like saying like, there's something up there at like 10K or 8K that I can't really get to with the Sennheisers, I'll pull these out, And if my monitors aren't giving me like, I just feel like I'm not confident in this decision, Right. And that's like that's the whole process of getting used to your monitors. Sure. You spend a lot of time with them. I could go back to when I first got my mix cubes, and like the first 6 months, I'm like, these things suck.
It's like, no,
there's a purpose for that.
Right. It's like,
no way.
It might not be them. It might be you.
It was
like,
totally me.
It's like, that's what my mid-range sounds like? Okay. Yeah.
And this is what it is. It's like, that's what it was. It exposed my crappy mixes. And then I'm blaming the monitors. The truth be told is like, I spend a lot of time on the monitors. I'm like, they were totally telling me what was wrong with my mixes.
Right. If I only spent more money, it would be better. There's also, I think we can probably close up the headphone thing, but there's a practical consideration also with open back, as we're talking about open back and closed back. Probably more mixing headphones also are open back, but when you're tracking, open back headphones might sound great to the player, but boy, do they sure bleed.
Yeah, that's a no-no. That's a no-go. Yeah, you want to track it closed.
Yeah.
Totally.
And even I've got those the GK Superphones.
Okay.
Which old school drummer Gordy Knutson, Knutson. And you'll see these phones and you'll recognize them. You'll see them in a bunch of studios, but they're like industrial ear protection style phones. like you would use for a jackhammer or something.
Sure.
And they fit really tight, and they actually give you about 30 dB of volume reduction.
Wow.
But they're built with those Sony drivers inside.
Okay.
So when you're tracking, and it's like, you know, you can get a drummer and you have those things on, and if he wants to just crank the click to the point where it melts your brain, like you're not getting that bleed coming out because they're sealed. Ultraphones is another one. Vic Firth makes Vic Firth drumstick manufacturer. They make another set. Again, they're all like those ear protection style phones with
I used
some
to
kind
use.
some,
I used to just have drummers bring their in-ears, and then we would throw those
Yeah.
hearing protection ones just over the top of
Over
them.
it, yeah.
yeah, and that's just, you know, to cut out headphone bleed.
Totally.
So we got the comp, we got headphones. Did your Mova give more specifics on? Okay,
Syncing.
yes, like taking concert audio and then syncing and mixing it. Old school, a slate will be your savior for this kind of thing. You know, when you would see those old things and ready, clack, you could do that. What I often would do is
Or snare hit.
a snare hit. You could run tone to get like to what's called striping a track. And you're like you can get a tone generator on your phone and a little splitter and have one signal, like your camera. Hopefully you are recording the audio coming in on your camera and the audio if you have a multi-track. And just at the beginning of that, run tone like through a Y cable going into an open channel on your multi-track, and then to the camera audio, and just turn that off. And then you'll have, you know, if you see something like this, you know that you can line up that singular hit. They used to do old things on like recording console talkback mics where people would like tap a pen right by the talkback, and they'd route, you know, talkback to. This is when you would try to like sync up two different decks. You would have like channel, like take an ADAT, 8 channels. You'd do like arm channel 1 and channel 9, and you'd click on the desk, and then you would hear it. You'd be like, oh yeah, I need to do like an offset or, you know, whatever the vary speed they had on there to be like, oh yeah, actually
Bro,
the decks
you just
aren't.
brought back so many memories.
Yeah, the decks aren't syncing, or old school when you'd like line up 2 24-track machines and you'd have SIMPD time code running out. But yeah, anything Mova you can do to have a single reference sound to the video and to the audio, that's the trick to lining that up. I mean, there's now, I will say this, like in like Premiere and some of these other more video oriented programs, they've got some pretty good stuff to line up audio.
Auto sync. It'll do an audio
Yeah.
sync. As long as you're capturing audio from your camera, or
Right.
audio from the camera, and then everything else.
And maybe that's the thing also, that like capture, if you weren't capturing audio on the camera, then that's now. And here's the other thing. Let's say your camera is 100 feet off stage. Well, that's 100 feet, you know, whatever the delay time milliseconds is. You know, when you're seeing it, you're seeing that image instantly, but the camera is 100 milliseconds behind
Right.
the PA. So, you know, but that's again where that some type of a digital thing, or, you know, the slate, you know. And if you're doing it on a camera mic and you're by the camera and you're trying to slate it, maybe have somebody hold the vocal mic, if it's a wireless vocal mic, back by the camera, and you can snap into it or clap into it. So the camera mic and the mic that would be on stage is getting the sound at the same time. You know.
Right.
There's that one.
Love it. But yeah, no, bro, you brought back so many memories with the ADAT thing. Yeah.
Yeah, don't put 3 of them together, man, or 4. But man, when you try to go like 40 tracks on ADAT, 32 with like those XT20s. You could sync
I
up.
used to use a lot of those DA88s, and we would do
Oh yeah,
the same
88s and 98s and that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have synced up, and this is again where the beauty of limitation is. You could sync up, with the XT20s, you could sync up like 4 of them to have 32 tracks. But like, it says the book says you can do 48. But when you would try to put that to sync, the fifth box, if you're that fortunate to have one, like it always gets some weird drift. Like the time code would just be like a couple, in today's, like, it'd be a couple frames behind, and it would just be like, That's where you'd put like all the extra stuff. Like that's where you'd print like your reverbs and delays to that. And then sometimes like, all right, I know that deck is going to drift just a bit. So like, I'm going to make the verb times a little bit closer because what I'm printing it to and having playback, it's going to be a little bit later anyway.
I actually still have in one of my racks, I have an Alesis XT20.
Yeah.
Only because just, I had a client one time that's just like, hey man, can we transfer what I have here? And I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
So I hung on to it.
No, Terry was asking one more question on compression. When side chaining, does the knee also affect the input the same way as previously explained in normal compression? I say yes, it does.
Does the knee affect the threshold?
Does the knee affect the input?
Well,
when side chaining,
I don't think it matters if it's side chained or not.
Yeah,
it's the side chain is whether it's like a self-keyed or a side chain key that for the whatever it's using as its input, it's hitting the detection circuit first,
right?
And then that knee is going to determine how long it takes your ratio to achieve its full effect. But yeah, I don't think I'm wrong on that. I mean, there's always a possibility. I've been wrong once, twice probably.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right.
Yeah. I don't think that it matters.
No.
And maybe there could be something. God, if it has a look ahead. But I don't think so. My gut says it doesn't matter what the input source is. You might just be perceiving it differently. Let's say you want to comp your side chain. Oftentimes you're comping a synth bass off of, some 808 or 909 kick thing,
right?
And you might be seeing it on that bass track reacting differently because you're watching that amount of compression as we watch instead of listen, but you're seeing how that's responding to the bass and thinking, oh, it's slow or something. But again, it's all those variables are being driven by that side chain input, if it's a sharp kick sound,
I think that's important. You just noted it too, because it's the perception of it.
Right.
Like just compression on one signal versus side chain is definitely going to have a different, perspective in terms of how you perceive it. So yeah, I get that. Our brains might be perceiving it as it doing something different. But it's technically just a different process. That's why it may be perceived different. Yeah.
Right. And it's how much of that source that is key input. And I think that it's also important, in your DAW as to, let's say you have you're side chaining a synth bass to a sampled kick. And you're also doing maybe some compression or something along the lines or on the kick, right? Making sure, and every DAW is a little bit differently, to where it's like you would be sending that kick through a bus to be the input to the compressor on the bass track. Like I've got my stuff like Pro Tools, I think it defaults to the bus send is post processing, you know, but I believe that you can select where you want that bus to pick off from. Like, is it sending that kick signal before it hits the compressor to the thing that you're side chained to, or is it compressing first on its track, then going to the bus, and then going to the other compressor that you're using as the side chain? So just make sure that like where, because I know like a lot of live desks, you can tell the side chain where you want it to come from. It'll be like pre EQ, post EQ, that kind of thing. So with plugins, it's a little bit different, but just make sure that if you're, you know, if it's coming, let's say you're compressing your 909 to your synth bass input, that it's that compressed signal that is the one that's triggering your side chained compressor versus the other one. Because then if it's post, then anything you do on the
processing wise,
the let's say the kick is going to affect how that sounds, which is going to affect the send, which is going to the compressor that you're using as the side chain. So just be aware of where where in the sound of the key input is coming from. Sorry, I'm about to confuse myself with that.
It's no problem, Terry. Those are all good questions.
Yeah, and it's complicated.
It is.
And this is where one of those things also with like side chaining, and I don't know, Terry, your level of experience or not. You know, it's like it's an important question to ask, and it sounds like the fact that you're asking that tells me that you already have some experience. But a lot of people will start mixing and they watch a YouTube video, and then all of a sudden they hear this side chain and think, I have to side chain.
I got to do it.
Yeah, and then it's like you start playing with it. And side chaining, it's a very, very specific use
100%
as to when you do it. And again, I don't do a lot of electronic stuff. I don't do like, hip hop stuff like that. But again, like I've been doing this as a career for a long time. I could probably count on both hands the amount of times that I've side chained.
Yep. Honestly,
it's a real specific reason why I would choose to do it. And it's either like it was something that I had to correct a performance. It's usually kick to bass.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would do things in a live circumstance where I've got the main mix going out, but I've got like the band on a bus and the vocals on a bus, and I might have an instance where the vocal is actually triggering the band bus to dip down a bit.
Oh.
And that's like, so when the vocal's really, really pushing, so I don't have to keep turning it up. The vocal is actually triggering the instruments to just duck a bit.
Totally.
So the vocal stays up. And I'll do that also on delay throws to where I'll have a comp on a delay and the vocal is triggering the compression on the delay. So you get that. It's like you do these delay throws all the time, and I'll still automate it, but a lot of it will like, as soon as the vocal kicks in, the delay is going like this. And when the vocal releases, then it comes back up and it gives you the sensation of a throw. So lots of cases to do it, but true side chaining, like I barely do it.
Yeah, and I'm probably in the same boat as you, and I do hip hop. Like I rarely use side chaining. I do a lot of parallel compression. I do tons of that.
Right.
Another thing that it's like widely used is in television.
Oh yeah, ducking
Yeah,
commercials and DJs. The announcers going and like, hey, come on back to K whatever it is. And it's always like some goofy names, like it's like Chad and the Gator in the morning, or something stupid, So it's like
Yeah, but,
regular
like, that's-
bro
I
name
wonder-
and an animal.
I don't know where the origins of sidechaining came from, but I have a hunch it actually came from film, and then it just started getting used in EDM.
I think it's film or radio.
Yeah, totally.
You
Like
know.
they utilized it in there, and then of course the engineers and musicians are just geniuses. We take things and yeah.
How
Disher.
can we use it?
Disher's asking, can you use track spacer in a live setting?
What's track spacer?
It's like a
That's the-
sidechain compression. That's what it is. It just
Yeah,
does
and
it.
it kind of squishes down the middle
But
a
it's
bit.
a plug-in, right?
It is.
Yeah. I would have, if they're in a live setting, I mean, it would have to be available like on your major like SSL, Avid, Digico, Presonus, Yamaha, that kind of stuff.
There's also it's called Live Professor or something like that allows you to put whatever plugin. You can use UAD, you can use
Yeah.
Slate, you can use all that stuff. But it's
Hey, it's Austin on Pure Rock 92.7 FM, The Laser.
the
That's the thing is if it works, it works. I actually think that track spacer would be pretty easy to use in a live setting, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. I just don't know if it's compatible with live
Right.
consoles unless you're running it, running it as an insert, like using a laptop, using it as an insert. Like Waves has the center plug. Yeah, it's like center inside where you can basically it takes your left right and gives you mid side control, and you could sit there and like pull the middle down or push the middle up and sort of change the width on things.
It's
I'll
already
say
there.
this, for me, live, I've started to get away from all the wave stuff. I've had it crash on me too many times.
Yeah,
And I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to do everything in the console.
I mean,
I think I have about 80% in the console, and I think the only thing I use waves for now is just pitch correction. That's it.
Yeah, the I think for a lot of like your higher end, you're sort of what I would consider them to be a touring grade consoles, your Avids, your Digicos, the PM stuff for Yamaha. I don't think you need a lot of outboard stuff. And it's the same kind of thing. Like the problem you get is these dudes that have built shows. Like I do a lot of work on the Avid S6Ls, which is the predecessor or what came after.
I used to have the
the
T-shirt.
profiles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of people that like, they've been mixing, I did a show last year for a legacy artist, but a well-known legacy artist. And, there was these issues with getting these plugins to work, and I'm going through and looking at these channels. And there's always a reason for somebody, and I'm not necessarily going to sharpshoot somebody on there. Like you see like crazy EQs on things, and it might have been just you're correcting something for a live environment. But it's a lot of these things like were built off of a show that was on a previous generation console, and Waves 9.0 and they're on 15 now, and they're still that's always the thing where you can they're the focals.
Hell yeah.
Love them. It's like again like dealing with all these tools we have, the plugins and stuff like that, using external processing and like a Wave server grid and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's awesome when it works, but just like any other computer, there's a chance that it could crash. So I definitely like all the stuff that's like, the stock Digico and Avid and Yamaha stuff. Like, you're not going to go wrong with that.
Most of the stuff I'm mixing on is the Allen and Heath D Live series.
Yeah, the D Live stuff's good. The Avanis,
Yeah.
all that stuff is good. Yeah, I'd rather not like add more points of failure. You got enough to worry about. That like, is the mic plugged in? Like, did whoever pinned the stage or did the patching? Like, do we have all the correct inputs?
That's what you were stressing out about, right, Ralph?
Is
You're like,
the
"How do you guys do
keyboard
this?"
player like when he switches patches? Are all the volumes leveled out.
Right.
You know, guitar players now they got their Fractal or, you know, Kemper or something, and they switch to a patch, and all of a sudden the level's either here or here,
Right.
you know, because they haven't normalized their, like, you know, to try to keep it away from the potty mouth, but like, it's too much shit to worry about, you know, to let alone to be like, oh, I need to have my Super Tap 6, you know, ping pong, you know, like, which I use that one all the time, but you know, it's because I'm old and I don't want to change. Yeah, but I've had the Wave server crash.
Yeah.
I have.
And if you're relying, again, like going back to Rich's post, if you're relying on that one thing,
yeah,
you know, I don't know, I'm not going to hire you, because that just tells me that, you know, your ability to solve problems, which I think is in any profession, you know, like, I don't care about your degree. I don't care about anything. Right. You know, it's like, can you solve problems? And that's what we're in the business of, solving problems. We're solving the problem of taking this broad concept of an artist's material and getting all this stuff, and how do we make it? And it's not a problem in the sense of like, I've got, you know, pancreatic cancer. That's a problem, you know, but we're solving this puzzle of how do we take all this stuff. Right. And it's like that old video with like Bob Rock talking about making the Black Album from Metallica, you know, and he's like, at the end of the day, it's got to come out of 2 speakers, you know, and it's like, yeah, that's the thing we have to figure out, is how to make all this stuff fit. So we're ultimately, you know, getting the artist or the composer's intent to the listener through their ear holes, you know. And that whatever the song is, that it gives them the feeling of why the person sat there sad in their bedroom with their acoustic guitar writing about a breakup. Like, you know, I want to make the listener cry at the end of the day. Yeah. You know, if that's the point, you know, so that is a problem to solve.
UAD or Focusrite for a portable solution?
UAD.
Yeah, I think you just have more flexibility, more options with the UAD.
Yeah, and I think the near zero latency for monitoring, and again, the ability to give artists a better sounding headphone mix through the plugins. I mean, I've told this story a bunch of times, and I had this band called Brother. You know, they're on TikTok and stuff. Check them out. Brother Band. They're out of North Carolina. They came up to my place and recorded an album last year, and their previous recordings were good, but it was like so clean and like obviously time aligned and perfected. And they'd been out touring a bunch, and I said I really wanted to capture. It's like, you guys have been playing live a ton, like old school thing. Like, we do a bunch of live shows to save up money to go into the studio versus like putting out a record then trying to get booked somewhere. And at the time I had a bunch of the Apollo stuff and was able to give them headphone mixes that already sounded kind of done. It'd be like, you know, giving you a mix off of an analog console. Right. You know, I've got channel EQ that's already on there. That's not causing any latency. I've got an outboard compressor going to the vocal thing or a bass thing or whatever. Like, and they're like, and it wasn't even that I was doing something magical. I was just doing basic input tone shaping, and it was hitting their ears without having to do low latency monitoring and all this other stuff. Like, they were just able to hear it sounding a little bit more polished. And they're like, wow, dude, this headphone mix sounds great. I've never heard it like this before. I'm like, yeah, it's because, you know,
that's because it's me.
Yeah, well, no, it's like, yeah, because we've solved the latency problem.
Right.
And then we've solved the processing problem by doing the processing before, you know, and monitoring.
Basically like an old analog console. Like
yeah, you're monitoring before it hits the tape, you know?
Yeah.
So you're not hearing off, you know, the repro head, you know, it's like you always want to hit the sync head. But yeah, that's, you know, for sure I would go with the UAD. And I think that they're both good companies. I think the UAD stuff is built a little better.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
totally. I agree.
To make, with all that, go get yourself one of those little SKB little suitcases that's got the foam cutouts and protect your gear. Don't have it travel in a box or wrapped in a towel. Like, it doesn't matter what you have if you don't, especially if you're doing mobile recording or touring. Like, the case is nearly as important as the gear.
Yes.
If you don't live in that world, and you kind of don't know. But like I can always tell guys when they show up to a gig, and they're coming in and like just all of this expensive gear is in like a duffel bag, or just like, wrapped in an old baby blanket or something. I'm like, oh God, what am I getting myself into? You don't know. I remember like I did a live show once, and this drummer's coming up. He didn't have a hardware bag. He's literally carrying like all these stands like in his arms. At first I'm thinking like, oh my God, you're going to pinch your fingers off before the gig.
Right.
But then it's just coming in and like, he played exactly like the gear looked.
Oh.
Yeah. And I was just like, okay, yeah.
Yep.
It's, doesn't always mean that, judging the book by the cover, but a lot of times, yeah, you're like,
100%.
Yeah.
Of course, Terry. Like you have had great questions, and like, I don't know, at least where I personally sit with people coming in and asking these type of questions, it makes me, it feels like we still have a promising future. There's engineers out there that want to carry the legacy on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, yeah, continue asking the questions. Like, keep coming back for sure. That's what we're up here for.
It's funny you talk about that type of thing. Like, I'm 51 now. Too old for a TikTok account, right?
I'm right behind you, bro. Right behind you.
But it's like, I'm starting to look towards when that end will be, at least professionally speaking. I don't think I don't ever want to stop playing music. I don't ever want to stop being involved in it. But I think there will come a point to where I'm like, I'm not chasing the next project. It'd be very selective, working with people that I've worked with for a long period of time. You find a lot of like older mixers that are like that. They're very rarely getting hired by young bands to do stuff. It's like, hey, CLA has mixed this past 7 records that we've done. He's the guy that we work with. And, maybe there'll be a point, even somebody like that he's only doing a handful of projects a year, but he's doing them with people that he wants to work with.
Right.
Same kind of thing. And I just started looking at that as like, but it's important to pass this stuff along.
Yeah.
There's no point in hanging on to all this education and this knowledge.
Well,
no,
that's
for sure.
Where I'm at right now in my career. It's like I've done so much and been doing it for so long that it's kind of hard to get me excited anymore.
Right.
So like, teaching and seeing people want to like learn and passing the torch. I'm like, I've had a lot of life there. So that's why I like doing it. It's because of that. Like this rinse repeat. I've been doing this like, especially like these past 7 years. Did I pause? Yeah, these past 7 years for me, I've like feel like I've been running on fumes, because I've just been working so hard, and it's this rinse repeat thing, and I'm like coming out of it, and I'm like, it's definitely important that I come back and at least like pass the baton.
It's funny to also, again, as you won't see it until you're there, and it just takes time to get there. But the same thing that we talk about nearly every single one of these podcasts is the basics. And that's, if anything that we could pass along. I mean, it's cool to get into like, well, how specific does this particular knee curve affect something? But it's like, it's still gain structure. It's still balance. At first, it's still a good sounding, or let's say this, a great song with a great arrangement played at a high level on good for the song sounding instruments.
Yep.
That's before, hopefully it's recorded well, but you record it well to best capture that thing. And then it's level, pan, high pass filter,
I pass 100%. Yep.
Then maybe do I need to does this need compression at all?
Totally.
If it was played consistently, like probably not.
I've had very few artists ever where I was able just to pot up the faders and go, I could balance this level out any way I want, and it wouldn't be wrong because it was a great song. It was arranged well. Right. It was played by really great players. But it's only been a handful of people that I've ever had that chance to work with. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a little high pass filter there, and you're just like,
it's like it's almost mixed. It's like I love getting projects that once it's done being tracked, the mix is already 80% done.
Yeah,
because you are thinking about the end result, as you're going in, and that's having, I think, a bigger concept. That's more on the producer to do, and sometimes as engineers we get shoved into that role where I'm engineering it, I'm tracking, I'm mixing, and I'm also like producing, mentoring, coaching, playing big brother at times. Being the referee,
bouncer.
yeah, exactly. Being the shoulder to cry on or whatever the case is, But yeah, at the end of the day, it's still, it's not like 18 plugins on a channel through my Better Maker, and like Goldfoss or some shit like that. It's like if you have to do all that, it's probably the song isn't that good anyway.
There's one thing I want to highlight that, and it's difficult in these music reviews. I join them a lot. I used to do them myself. It's hard to just pinpoint. Okay, this is what I would do with this record, right? I got to look at it, right? But I could almost 90% guarantee this, that most people aren't utilizing the high pass and low pass filters.
Right.
And holy crap, you're depriving yourself of like what it really is, because this is how you create space in your record.
Right.
Yeah. And you could kind of think of high pass and low pass as distance, because it does. It gives it that depth. You could tuck it behind things and then get things to live in their own space. And I think a lot of people overlook this. Like, we're just trying to EQ and like sweep. It's that little sweeping crap I see all the time. And I'm, I say it like it's negative. It's not like you don't sweep. You do, but like not the way that it's taught on the internet. I would never do it that way. Like I go high pass, low pass first. I dial everything in through my leveling, get it to sound balanced, and then what can we do to this? Right. And most of the time, I'm sitting in my SSL and I'm making little hair moves on the knobs. It's just tiny little things. And then this is when I focus on transients. I want the hi-hats to kind of poke through. I want the vocals to live in the mid-range. I want my bass to be real nice and round and heavy in the bottom, and with a nice punch of the kick. And and it just like when you dial it in this way, it's the basics. Super, super easy. You're probably just with high pass, balancing correctly, good recordings, good production, good arrangement. You're 95% of the way there. Everything else is just the secret sauce of the engine,
Blue Icy. It's talking about, you're not really panning back and so the sense of depth, giving the source a sensation of being closer or further away. Yeah, that's exactly it. And sometimes it's like even on the like high pass side of things, like maybe cutting out more of the fundamental pitch of a particular instrument, which then it doesn't give you the sensation that you're right in front of it. And also, but low passing as well can do the same thing where
those air frequencies.
Yeah,
exactly.
Which, that can sometimes bring things more forward. And it can work both ways. High pass can bring it forward or
totally
push it back, depending upon what the source is.
Yep.
And
I'll
also,
say this too.
Yeah.
Sorry, my apologies.
No, go.
That like when you're doing the low pass, oftentimes there's just like a lot of white noise kind of stuff going on up there, and like goop. Even though we don't hear it, it's goop, and it's like it's just jacking your whole mix up, and and I just do it like often where I'll do like little moves. It's not a lot, right? And it makes a like gigantic difference in how I perceive the record now. I could like hear everything in its own space.
Right. Yeah. Well, you also are. You're allowing for headroom.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff, and predominantly the bulk of your headroom is always eaten up by low end, and reduce, that's why it's always the thing of like, make your EQ moves if you can, within the mix versus in solo. But you'll find you can probably cut low end out of a lot of stuff that really doesn't need it. And all of a sudden, like you could look at your master meter, and if it's somewhere that's like, it's getting pegged, right? Or you're hitting at the -3, and then you just start going in and high passing things, even stuff that you might not hear necessarily.
100%.
And lots of, a lot of times, man, there's room noise, there's HVAC, all that stuff. That you just start chopping it out, and you'll find like, except for like your kick, and I'll high pass kick, I'll high pass bass, I'll cut out the really low sub stuff. Like something it doesn't need it for most acoustic things. And then all of a sudden you could just go in and not change your mix, and then start high passing things, and then find, oh man, I've got like 6 dB more of headroom now.
100%.
Because I cut out, and then like you're listening to it, like I'm not hearing necessarily a difference. Maybe it sounds cleaner.
Yeah.
You're just getting rid again of that low end goop.
Yep.
Goop is everywhere.
It is. There's like, I mean, I was dealing with, I had like an ARP synth I was working on the other day, and then I think Isaac was in talking about the low end. And I'm like, I kept cutting, high pass, and kept cutting. And like, I'm like, this seems extreme, but I'm like, without it, the bass just disappears and the synthesizer's taken over.
Yep.
And I engage it, and it's like that now, like Isaac likes to say, he's like, dude, you're rattling my iPhone,
Right.
And it's because of that. It's like I'm allowing it to live in its own space. It created that headroom for now the bass and the sub frequencies.
I kid you not, Brian. Like legit, I'll have my phone like on the counter while I'm making breakfast or something, and I'm watching Rob, and all of a sudden my phone just starts.
Yeah. It's fun. We were talking about headphones and like that stuff, and about high pass. And there's something also like in the tracking side, and this is something for, it's a big thing with singers. And whether you're doing live like in-ear monitors or vocal tracking, there's this thing called the occlusion effect. And that's like when you plug your ears and let you talk, you hear resonance, and you're hearing head resonance, and it's vibrating through the jawbone and that. And a lot of times, whether it's if I'm doing monitors for somebody or I'm doing a vocal, I'll high pass the vocal to their ears. Maybe for guys, 250, 300 for female voices. And you think, oh my God, when I'm listening to it, it's like, it sounds so thin. But for them, they have all this resonance. And I'm not,
Right.
This is excuse me, this is a monitoring EQ. I'm not printing it. But when you cut out all that extra stuff, because again, they feel the resonance, they're fine with it. And they can be so much faster getting on pitch, because they can,
all that extra.
all they're hearing is the clarity on their voice. So it's another like high pass trick,
Yeah.
So true. Like I think that this is the most powerful thing about EQ. And people
filter.
Yeah, it is. It's just the filters. And people ask me often, like, how do you know how to EQ? Start by filtering. Maybe even limit yourself to it. Just filter. And then you'll start to realize, like, I don't really need to do much after this, And if you get it correct, it's 100% going to do that for you.
Who's the guy? It's another creator. It's got, I want to say he's European dude. He's kind of got like the sort of mohawk.
Oh,
but
yeah.
He lives in Miami.
I don't know his name, but the big dude.
Yeah. I don't want. I ain't gonna.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
But yeah, he was talking about that same kind of thing of like, especially when you're young. Someone was asking him a question about like what's the best EQ to use, and he said like if you're young, like use something that's like a fixed EQ, like
100%.
That Harrison, that's fine. Use the API 550A, a 3-band EQ with David Mixbus. That's right. apologies to that creator. I love the stuff, and it's always like
Great.
I look at him and he's also the guy that's probably not going to take any shit in the studio because he could probably just, beat the snot out of somebody.
face.
He's like, "What'd you say? You want more of what in your headphones?"
I've been repeating what he says a lot. He said this. He said it on TikTok. He said, "Record like you can't mix, mix like you can't master."
Right.
And I'm like, "Oh, listen to this, y'all! Like this is really the key to it right there." I think that's some of the best advice ever. This is what you said: lock yourself into an EQ with just 3 bands.
Right, and I think that you'll find that if you don't have the ability to use like a Pro Q3 or the new XEQ, which I really like that one from SSL. I can't make this Q of 0.5, just scoop half the frequency out. You fixed points, high shelf, low shelf, and see what you can do, and you'll probably find that you're doing 2 dB or the 4 dB or something like that, 1 click, 2 click, plus or minus on stuff. And you're like, I think it sounds pretty good.
But
you don't have to futz with it.
Stuff. That was all the stuff that we were listening to. I mean, all the hits and everything like that. They were mixed on fixed points.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. There was no. I mean, and there's also even like SSL, which I think the G's. And then certainly the 9000 series stuff, you had Q control on there, and so you did have parametric on those channels.
Right.
But it's you'll find that that's like especially you go to an E series or something, and you'll just carve out a 3 to 500 on a kick drum, but you'll pull up minus 15, and you're like, oh yeah, I know that's exactly the sound.
That's what I was looking for.
Yep.
And this is another cool thing about filtering, right? Is that you could filter out and you'll get everything to sit in its own space and then go back and EQ and boost the highs and things.
Sure.
Watch what happens. Now you're finally getting it to translate. If anyone in the chat has been in this situation where it's I just want the vocals to be brighter, and you're boosting them, and it's now it's just harsh and ugly.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what it is because the filtering wasn't done right. And this could be maybe another instrument is now fighting with the vocals, or the vocals needed to be filtered to begin with. And then you could go in and start adding stuff to it. And I find this to be very effective.
He's talking about the Bobby Owinski book. Yeah, the Mix Engineer's Handbook, Recording Engineer's Handbook, Mastering Engineer's Handbook. Those are great.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah, I've got them on my shelf. I don't know. I don't know if I have the first edition, but I certainly have some older editions. And then there's another one Recording Handbook, which is a really big, modern recording techniques, I think.
Yeah, modern recording techniques. That's what we that's what they made us read.
It's a big, thick one. But those are all great, And Owinski, he also has a drum one. I picked up another one, and it was the Al Schmidt recording techniques, and basically it's the excerpts from his biography, and it just is rather than all the life story stuff, it just pulls out the stuff about his miking techniques and mic choices and stuff. And those are great resources, especially if you're dealing with an instrument that where that recording handbook is great. Not everybody's recorded an oboe before, and being able to go to that book and be okay, I've never done this. I don't want to look stupid. I'm going to, oh yeah, this is, yeah. Oh, well, here's a good general, starting point.
The Art of Mixing VHS, bro.
Oh, that visual book?
Yeah, the one
where it's
everything was the balls and stuff like that.
Yeah, the guy's on a huge DMT trip or something, but it's made with that 90s era
it was
computer
green
animation
screen.
and
Yeah.
it's whoa man, I put the ball here and you could really it's super trippy stuff, man.
Did you ever see that, Rob? Did you?
It somewhat rings a bell, but
find some of the
terrible.
And it's not.
It was great information.
Yeah.
Just terribly
The
produced.
visual of it, and it's so if you ever remember when some of the first CGI cartoons would come out, and they'd have this whole thing with this crazy marble rolling down and do like a big Tinker Toy set or something, along with some track, you know. And
a lot of that stuff was cringy back then, man.
yeah,
But
that was the exact same animation style that was used in that visual art of mixing, and I'm like, I mean, that's cool. I get it. I get what you're doing.
sure.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's hard to watch.
It's so dated, you know. But probably at the time, everyone's like, "Oh, dude, it's like it's so you get to see where it is. Here's the vocal,
I think he had a school
the vocals back
like in
here.
California or something like that, where he
So,
actually
of course, it's
taught it
California. You know?
with a data glove. He had like data gloves or something. Like
Oh,
that.
wow.
You could actually make. I would think it
Like
was
the
in
old
San
Game
Francisco
Boy
or
data
something.
glove.
Yeah, like the Game Boy data glove.
And those are worth money if you got one, you know.
Terry actually has another question, and I think we'll probably start wrapping this up here soon.
Okay.
So for capturing vocals, besides having a good room mic or a good room and good mic, how do I help an artist who doesn't know any good mic techniques?
Show them a good mic technique, you know, for sure. I think everything is about a relationship, you know, and hopefully you can build that. Sometimes if it's a new client coming in, you don't have a lot of history. You got to sort of like fake the history and make them as comfortable as possible, as quickly as possible. Smile, be encouraging. I think, you know, so you can be like, so they feel like when they walk in, all right, yeah, this guy seems like he knows what he's doing. Like, you know, at least you got to open them up to taking the counsel that you're giving. Then, like, yeah, show them, say, hey, yeah, here's where I want you to stand. I mean, I'm not always a pop filter guy, but I think with less experienced singers, the pop filter is also a thing where you can literally have them say, like, if you're right up on it, this is where I need you to be. And you can sort of, rather than necessarily using it just as pop filters, plosives, SSTs, Ks, all that stuff, but you can get it. It's a tactile reference point that they're having some type of consistent
Distance between you and the mic.
positioning. Yeah. You could put a little painter's tape on the floor. So stand on this. And it also said, like, don't ever make them feel that you have to be right here. These are the rules, you know. But it's like, yeah, just if you kind of hang out in this area, that'd be great. And it's like, it'll sound best to you if you do that, rather than for me. You're not recording for me. I'm just some monkey pushing buttons, you know. Like, you're recording for you, for your art, for your music,
Right.
you know. Give them all of that, and then you can sort of sneak that stuff in. And then also it's like, you know, when they're happy with the headphones right there, and it's like, hey, if you hear yourself not sounding as loud as you think that you should, or too loud, you know, just take a look up and see if you're still in that spot. If you're not hearing yourself, you might have drifted back, or if it's too loud, you know. So you can kind of, I think, give them that kind of counsel, which, I mean, that's always been the approach that I've done with like less experienced vocals, or the same thing, or any other instrument. Like if it's a, you know, a lot of time, you know, drums, guitar, bass, you don't have to worry about that, but it's the same kind of thing. Brass instruments where they're holding it and they're moving around, you know, you kind of want to get them to be like in a certain area, and you can, you know, encourage that by, you know, maybe put a rug out. So yeah, as long as you're standing on this rug, you're probably pretty good. And then also, last bit of me hogging this answer.
It's all good.
You don't stop as the engineer, even if it's off. Like, let that shit go,
Yeah.
because you'll kill it, especially with somebody who's probably nervous. You will kill all the energy. You know, it's like, that's your job also in solving problems. That's your job to fix that shit sometimes. Like, you might have missed a word. Just look at it. You saw the wave come in. Cool, man. You'll just clip gain that shit, you know? And so when it plays back to them, they hear it. Now, again, if it's something that is really like like you missed a word, then you do the old school trick. Like, hey, that was great. We would definitely want to keep that. And actually, what I'd like to do something and get a different sound because maybe we can blend it. Can you move closer into the mic and have them do another pass? And
I
maybe
typically will
you
do 3 passes. All of them do just 3 passes, just however they feeling it, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I just make notes. And I say,
Yeah,
I want to go back, punch this, just punch this, punch this.
For
and
sure.
That way they've gotten their creativity out.
Yeah.
Everything they wanted, the performance, all that kind of stuff. And I'm just making those notes. Go back to those locations, have them just punch that in. Hey,
Yeah.
thank you. Great
and,
job.
and that's the kind of stuff where like if you have to recut something to get it, don't ever blame them.
Oh yeah.
It's like, you piece of shit, you suck. Like that's you. Hey, you're not going to get hired anymore. That's for sure. And then and so it's a bit of a white lie, you know. But and sometimes that's producing. Some people need a hug. Some people need a kick in the balls.
Yeah.
You know, it's a whatever it takes to get the performance out. But like again, if you have somebody who's apprehensive, we're not fixing anything. You didn't make any mistakes. I'm looking to get a different sound.
Yeah.
So we've got either options or I had a really cool idea. I heard you do this thing and it inspired me. Can we do more of that? And then, but really what I'm doing is getting you to get closer to the mic so I can go catch that one word that you missed,
Yeah.
you know, and then maybe you get something cool. I don't know, but you know, never make them feel bad for that. You know, always positive, always encourage. And as much like salty trash talk as we might do here, like when it comes down to working with the artists, you know, you gotta support them. You have to make them feel, even if it's some local band of like dads coming in that just want to like have their band that plays out at the VFW. Like I had a group that came in last year and did that. And man, I treated those dudes like rock stars.
That's awesome.
And they came in and they had the time of their life, just coming into the studio for a day, jamming with their buddies. They walked out with something that sounded pretty good, or better than they ever could have done on their own. And it's like, yeah, they weren't great, but I was always like just positively encouraging it along the way. And just like Isaac said, like have a notepad, be writing things down, you know, whether you're referencing bars and beats, you're referencing time, you know, little edit things, and just don't stop it unless it completely collapses or they say, oh, I'm sorry. Like if they stop, then obviously you have to stop tracking. But other than that, just, yeah, you don't have tape. I'm not worried about like having to put another $400 reel on the machine. Dude, it's digital. Yeah. I got hard drive space. Hard drives aren't even a consideration anymore. I got terabytes, you know, I'm not going to run out. I can record you at 192. I don't give a shit. It's like, I got space for days. So just let that thing eat until they stop. So that's all I have to say.
I'm going to add to the notes from Isaac, because I think that's a big part to being a tracking engineer, is to be following along with the artist and to detailed. But if you could reach out to the artist before they come to your studio and have them bring in the lyrics, so you could follow
totally
as the lyrics go through, and you can make notes on words and things like that. Like this helps a lot. And then one other thing I would add, because I think Brian nailed it, but help them get into the mood, the emotion.
Yeah.
You know, let's close your eyes. Let's think about the set setting. Let's think about when this happened to you. Let's really get into the psychology of why you wrote this song.
Yeah.
Go in there and belt it out. Let's get that emotion out of you. Are you pissed? Are you sad? Are you happy? Right. Let's get that emotion. And if you can capture this, you're off to the races for sure.
Yeah, and that's also where like ask them to tell you the story of the song.
Exactly.
You know, and get them to say it. And that's not only being informative to you, it's putting them in the headspace, but it also is telling them, hey, I'm interested in what you have to say.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not just some monkey pushing buttons or being like the old grizzled sound guy of like, another, you know, mid-tempo alt rocker,
right?
You know, with your sad lyrics because you didn't get an SUV when you turned 16 and you're crying about it. Like, you know, I mean, I might be thinking that, but I'm never gonna say it out loud, you know. But yeah,
I just read that, dude.
I would say, like, you know, there's pros and then there's Joes.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, do you even sidechain, bro?
The only chains I have on my necklace are gold. Yeah.
like my records. Yeah.
I got to get rolling, man.
Yeah,
it's time. It's time. We did it. We did a good session today. Thank you, chat, by the way. Like, great questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Great conversation. I really want to get back to doing this. So we'll definitely get back to it next week, and keep it rolling.
Perfect.
And so chat, like, please hit the notification, of course, on my page so you're notified when we do this. Please follow my friend here, Isaac, Kingdom Come Studios, and Reference Mix, Brian, as they share amazing knowledge and are always glad to help and teach. So appreciate everyone. But Brian, Isaac, until next time.
See ya.
See you.
Stay blessed, everyone. Peace.